Hey, everybody. Welcome on back. It's the Twisted History podcast, and the whole gang is here. It's myself. It's the Saint Anne, right to me. And then right next to her is Jeff Vibert. You know him as Vibs. He walks to work every day wearing uncomfortably short shorts and a tank top. Then he changes into the outfit that you see in front of you right now if you're watching us on Rumble.
Last summer was the summer of the sweat rag. I did a sweat rag, and then that's just you're still sweaty. Your clothes get sweaty. You got the back sweat. This summer, I have a completely different change of clothes.
Did you tuck it in your back pocket?
No,
Like, where would you keep it?
I just walk with it.
You walk
just
with it?
walk with it and dab. That was me dabbing.
But it's tank top every day.
Tank top every day, running shorts.
You get a little sun. While you're
Get a little sun while I'm going.
Yeah.
It's pleasant. Summer in New York doesn't have to be miserable.
I might start doing that. And then it's Handsome John on the ones and twos. This is the first show that John's going to be eating through most of the first part because he had ordered lunch right before he got here. Everyone thinks it's adorable. I think it's unprofessional, but I don't know what to say. The show is sponsored by BetterHelp. We all carry around different stressors, big and small. When we keep them bottled up, it can start to affect us negatively. Therapy is a safe space to get things off your chest, figure out how to work through whatever's weighing you down. If you're thinking about starting therapy, why don't you give BetterHelp a try? It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist. Switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. We've had a couple of people who've reached out to me since BetterHelp has been on board, and they've tried it out. They said it's extremely easy to use, extremely easy to switch around if you don't like the guy or gal that you're stuck with. So there's really no reason you can't get stuff off your chest with BetterHelp. Get it off your chest with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/twisted today. Get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/twisted to get 10% off your first month. Thank you so much, BetterHelp, for coming back. And away we go with the twisted history of dumping. Before we get started, I was chatting with one of our listeners who was about to do an 8-hour road trip with her family. She was going to listen to us the whole way. Her name is Danielle Bercaw, Bercaw. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. She's an absolute smoke show.
Oh, yeah?
Just an absolute stunner. So I'm giving her a shout out in case she's listening right now. We appreciate all the support. I won't say what I was about to say.
Why?
Big pendulous hams on her. I'm just joking.
Vibsy's listening.
Big old
yeah,
bangers on
absolutely.
her. Well
But yeah,
done.
so I think that if you have a bunch of people who don't listen to Twisted History and you feel comfortable putting it on in a car for a long car ride, thinking that people will kind of be involved with it and like it too, that's great. I love that because
That's fun.
I think somebody handing me the aux cord gives me a lot of anxiety. I'm not overly good at that because some of the stuff these two out of the three people who are with me know that my musical taste is older and a little bit more alternative, right? I mean,
Depending on your mood, too.
Yeah.
It could be a little bit dark. It could be a little...
Depeche Mode.
a little Depeche
Yeah.
Mode,
Yeah.
right? Like if I'm driving down to LBI with John and we're going to Okies to get the B package of barbecue treats and I throw on like Ned's Atomic Dustbin or the Trash Can Sinatras, I wouldn't feel comfortable because John is very judgmental.
Judgy John.
Meanwhile, he eats in front of people. He doesn't care. So anyway, I applaud this young lady. It's Danielle Bercaw, and she's a fan. I hope her family's enjoying Twisted History, particularly today.
I went on a road trip with a girl one time when I was like 21. It was my girlfriend, and I was like, "Hey, why don't you put some of your music on?" And she was like,
Oh,
"You
no.
wouldn't like it. You wouldn't get it. You wouldn't like it." And I was like, "Oh, all right." We broke up like
Like I say,
a month
yeah.
later. Yeah, I was like, "Bitch, like what a pretentious thing." No, my music's too good for you. All right.
We were singing
That's
at
very
Punk rock.
Yeah, I was like, "Ah,
we were singing at the top of our lungs in our rental car in Talladega, and it was myself and Annie in the front seat, and in the back seat was Spider, Devlin, and Manoli.
And Bridget.
So we were a packed car, and I have a couple mixes, and I sing at the top of my lungs particularly with Bridget.
yeah."
And so we were there, so we're singing like Celine Dion and stuff, and everyone's kind of like having a good time with it. They're and then but like embarrassingly loud singing. We're drinking and all that stuff. Nobody driving, drinking. And then Manoli had said put something on, and it's
he
like
picked
we,
like a
like we-
Fleetwood Mac song.
yeah, he's like put on like some, and it's like we didn't even hear.
Everyone
him.
was like, no.
Yeah.
At the same
So
time.
I'm better than Manoli, but I don't know where I am along this.
Have you guys seen the Celine Dion documentary yet?
No, she's
No.
got stiff person
She's got stiff person
right?
syndrome. I don't know. Apparently, it's great. There's like scenes of her like going through it. She really put
Really?
herself out there. Yeah, I'm gonna check that out.
I love her. She's fun. Like when she does that driving, like singing in the car with James Corden. Is that who does the singing in the car?
I think carpool karaoke. Yeah.
She's fun. Like she rolls up to people and she'll go up next to someone, like roll down the window, and she'll sing at them. And she gets like all pointy and like she gets real involved. And then she rolls up the window and drives away. I love her. She's a good sport.
She's an icon.
She really is.
I will tell you too that me and Willie used to sing "It's All Coming Back to Me Now" on Barstool Breakfast. Willie's got a pretty good voice, and that's a pretty powerful song. Mm-hmm. But like when it's like "It's all coming back," Willie got fucking angry. Like he was like, there was moments of gold and there were flashes of light. And I was like, holy shit. Then you remember he's a 400-pound fucking monster from the Bronx who won a Super Bowl. And I was like, shit, I hope I didn't do anything wrong. The things I never do right. Somebody else, I was just happened to be in the men's room the other day when a DM popped up. I don't get to a lot of DMs and I apologize. But some guy just sent, love Twisted History and the food TikToks, you're the man. His name is Jack Blask. And then I started chatting with him, and he said something which I don't listen to. He's like, I don't realize. Like, I listen to you guys all the time. It's surreal to have this interaction, just to kind of chat. I'm not saying he's a fan.
Did you tell him you were in the men's room that you were texting him in the jump?
No. But, I don't know. It's just one of those things.
Just because you outed it now. Maybe you would let the guy know ahead of time.
It's just a good time to check up on stuff.
You and Vibs are such a cool dynamic, and I love history pods. I was like recording Twisted History Dumps tomorrow. I'll tell Vibs, and I'll also tell Annie you hate her. And he's like, I refuse to compliment girls in case my girlfriend goes through my phone. She scares me. I think that's cool. So anyway.
That man is a smart man. That might be the smartest man I've been around.
He's like, my dad's a huge fan as well. Pumped for the new episode. So Jack Blask. So it's 2 shout-outs. I don't give a shit. I'll keep shouting people out. Oh, one more thing. This week or next week, rather, Annie and I are going down to New York Stock Exchange for the first time in a long time. Not a buddy of mine, a guy that I had met through Barstool Finance, started a fund called Y'all. And real conservative guy, his name is Adam Curran. And this fund only invests in companies that does not have any DEI segment. Like he feels this diversity, equity, inclusion, they're not against it, but they think when companies kind of force themselves to follow it, it hurts the bottom line for their shareholders. So they only invest in this basket of stocks called Y'all, which is cool. And it's non-DEI stocks, which obviously everyone's like MAGA and all that kind of stuff. Doesn't matter. But they're listing on the New York Stock Exchange. So since Tyler Morin, who still does the water coolest, and I still read it every day, and I had done this with him, we were one of the first people to give him any kind of shine, because it's a pretty cool thing where everybody else is like, oh, you have to hire so many people and do all this diversity, equity, inclusion, which is wonderful. I really don't give a fuck about it either way. I thought it was an interesting, stand to take. So he's like, you want to come down and ring the bell with us? So me and Andy I'm going to be up on the balcony and shit like that. It'll be cool. I haven't been down there in a while. And he's like, I only have one spot on the balcony, he'd said. Thinking that maybe I wouldn't take it because you don't want to leave your wife when you take her to things. Meanwhile, Annie's the king of the New York Stock Exchange.
Yeah. I've rang the bell so many times.
Yeah. And I'm like, you don't understand. She would have left me for dead. Like I would have been sitting there twiddling my fucking thumbs while she's playing, grab ass with all her old buddies and stuff like that.
I'll be in the lighting booth above you guys. All the secret squirrel moves.
What's the one thing you're looking forward to going back down there for the first time in a while?
There are only a few people down there that I used to do business with for my time, just because the New York Stock Exchange has gone the way of the dinosaur. A lot of people have retired, and now it's been about 6 years. So all those factors doesn't make it as fun as if we were going back 5 years ago. But there are a couple of people down there, particularly guys like Tommy Bent, who are, I'm telling you right now.
That boy Bent.
Yeah, that boy Bent. You would love him. Like, there's so many people down there who are still down there. Jimmy.
He was my broker when I
think Johnny Latz is still down there.
Is he?
I think so. So there's all these different faces that we're going to see.
A lot of the old school guys that started on the curb are there now still.
I don't like going down because the New York Stock Exchange is now become the greatest catering hall in New York City. And when we were down there, it was the absolute epicenter of capitalism and open outcry market. It was fucking awesome. It was just cool. I mean, made me call up and say, hey, listen, I'm not going to law school. I'm staying here for the rest of my life.
I would love to do a Twisted History of the New York Stock Exchange.
Yeah.
I would love to do that one.
I feel like we've talked about that before.
Yeah.
We should.
I tried to do something where we could go down there and film, and they didn't allow it because it was Barstool. New York Stock Exchange, I don't think is, wants that. They don't want this smoke.
No.
Well, on my other podcast, we had Jimmy Young on, and he was going to do it from the trading floor, but coincidentally, it was too loud that day, which is good because you don't really have days like that down there anymore.
Yeah.
So he had to do it from home later that night, but it was good.
Yeah. I'm on that podcast. So Annie and a gentleman are doing a podcast, and a lot of it is floor stories. And her and this guy Danny, and I'd gone on. I told stories of how I got down there. It's pretty interesting. So what's the name of it? Full
It's
name?
called Pencils with Erasers. I met him because he wrote a script about the trading floor called The Opening Bell, and I'm writing a script about my life growing up around the trading floor.
Maybe I'm misremembering. Didn't we do one on the stock exchange?
We did one on 9/11.
We did a 9/11
No.
one.
I could have sworn we talked about stock like terms. And
Oh, sure.
stuff.
I did.
Or maybe it was the stock 1929, the stock market crash.
Might have been
The
the
crash.
might have been the
Might have been the
crash.
crash.
Yeah, it might have been the crash.
I think we allude to it so often and we cover it. It just comes so naturally. But the history of the exchange and all the people down there, I think it gets lost that it's it's the blue collar division of Wall Street, the trading floor itself.
Yeah.
And I think people don't realize that. And I think that's what's one of the most fascinating aspects about the exchange, because it's so iconic with the building and the flag and the bull and now the girl and all these different things. And I don't think people realize that the people that actually work on the floor, how historic it is, and just all the different stories and all the different
The
characters.
building itself is
Yeah.
a architectural marvel. I think it's the largest freestanding square room, the main room, without any kind of buttresses or anything like that. It's an engineering marvel. And I had seen something on social media about all these different places that were once architectural wonders that had then been redone and whatnot, and how they've been ruined. I hope it doesn't happen to the New York Stock Exchange, because if you're a fan of history, walking around FIDI, I think you still get there's still a lot of juice to squeeze there, even though things have changed. You know, Morgan Guarantee and Trust right across the street from the New York Stock Exchange.
Trinity Church, where
yeah,
Alexander Hamilton's buried.
Yeah, it's like Secco and Vanzetti type shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. My dad's street is right down there.
Where I had my first prostate check was in, you know what I mean? Yeah, I'd gone across the street because I was
Kinda
shitting
changed.
blood. So yeah, so there's a bunch of stuff. So the
This
reason
budding
we don't,
romance. I
yeah,
mean,
right,
really.
yeah, our budding romance. The reason we don't really do too much as far as finance, because we don't know a lot about it. Like, we did our job and that was it. So I was never like a financial analyst or anything. So, but whatever. This podcast is about dumping, and not the way that I typically joke around about taking gigantic dumps.
Like a chit chat with that guy.
Yeah, like when I was talking to Jack Blask. But the reason that I started this is because we have a very important historical anniversary coming up. Today we're taping, and it's June 27th, 2024. So April 20th. So we're about less than a month and a half away from August 8th, 2024. August 8th, 2024 will mark the 20th anniversary. Exactly 20 years ago on August 8th, 2024. That would be 20 years since a tour bus belonging to the Dave Matthews Band dumped an estimated 800 pounds of piss and shit from the bus's Blackwater tank through the graded floor of Chicago's Kinsey Street Bridge onto an open-top passenger sightseeing boat sailing in the Chicago River below.
That's so
That's a
nasty.
huge sentence.
Drove by this about 100 times whenever we were in
When you're in Chicago,
Yep.
with the plaque, there's a plaque on
Yep.
it, shit like that.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
The bean's closed. This is open.
Yeah.
The Kinsey Street Bridge.
But did you know about it when? Were you a Dave Matthews fan?
Not really. No. I like some of his songs, but I'm not like a huge Dave Matthews fan.
John, you a jam band guy, Dave Matthews?
Yeah, I've been to probably like 40 shows.
Really?
Damn.
Holy shit.
That's a lot of
Yeah.
shows.
Yeah, since
What
like
would you
2006,
say?
I'm getting old.
I tell you, I was 1989 or 1990, and I used to get the CMG New Music Sampler because I had the radio show, WVFI, Voice of the Fighting Irish, and we had a morning radio show, me and my roommate Daryl, shout out Daryl Clark, and we used to play a lot of music, all new music. So the CMG New Music Sampler, on it, one of the first weeks was Jimmy Thing by, before Under the Table and Dreaming came out, which I think is what Jimmy Thing was on the album. And so, it was the first time anyone's played it on the radio at Notre Dame. And so I'm like a casual fan. I don't know a lot about him. I just know like the hits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I feel.
Yeah. I don't know if it was one of those things where you go to the concert and every song is 20 minutes. Does it get jam bandish?
They do some like that for sure.
Okay.
I mean, they're pretty much a mix now of like, you don't get as many deep cuts as you want, right? Because they're still going to play like Crash and
Yeah.
Yeah. But do you think
Joe
it's
Dirt
one of,
soundtrack.
do you think it's one of those things where kids still know about him? Like
great question.
like,
I don't think so. I've been on
No.
some dates before and I've said like John Mayer and the girl's like, he's kind of old. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Oh,
Right.
no.
Yeah. You gotta stop dating 16-year-olds.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but I don't know how dated this is.
Well, yeah.
Well, I would say Dave's probably not big on TikTok. He's probably not big on like the social apps, right? So
Yeah.
I wonder where.
He was in a
always
couple of
been-
Adam
Excited by that
Sandler
question.
movies.
Yeah, he's always been a big touring force.
Yeah, I like. I don't dislike him. I should say I don't listen to a lot of satellite.
Oh, no.
On by the moon.
Oh, God.
that was
Right?
good. I was gonna try to do it, but I can't top that.
I want to hear a whole album.
27 Jennifers
Do
by
not
Mike
encourage him.
Doty. I think he sings on that. One of my favorite artists is this guy named Mike Doty, and he sings Tremendous Brunettes. Tremendous Brunettes by Mike Doty. Dave Matthews sings a chorus on it.
I feel like Dave Matthews always does like 3-day concerts. Like
Yeah.
he's got like
Yeah.
multiple days everywhere. But
Yeah.
he's still huge.
Saratoga's a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I didn't know about this when it happened 20 years ago. I never read
I
about
actually
it.
thought it was a conspiracy, or not a conspiracy, but a
Fake news
urban
story.
legend.
Yeah.
I definitely
So-
heard
so
about.
this
I
is-
definitely knew about it.
So this is the deal
was
that everyone
gross.
needs to know. For people who don't know the story, or people who haven't been to Chicago even, because we have such a global reach now, John. The Chicago River is covered by a bunch of bridges that you can pass over throughout the inner part of the city, and most of those bridges have steel grating as the floors, which makes sense because Chicago gets so much rain and snow. It just passes right through the steel grating, so you don't have to shovel it or to plow it or to salt it, right? So a lot of these are steel grated bridges, and so that's one thing you need to know. And two, Chicago, to drive along the river or to sail along the river in a boat, there's a bunch of architectural stuff to see. So they do a lot of architecture tours on the Chicago River. So knowing those two things, on 8/8/2004, so 20 years ago, passenger boat Chicago's Little Lady was hosting the 1 p.m. Chicago Architecture Foundation tour of the Chicago River at the exact same time that the driver of Dave Matthews' tour bus was going over the Kinsey Street Bridge.
I shouldn't laugh because it's not
Yeah.
funny, but
Yeah.
I mean, talk
It's-
about
I mean,
time
it's
and
fucking
place.
Hilarious, I think.
Yeah. So the guy is like, listen, I'm going over a grate that's going to dump into the Chicago River 20 years ago, right? It was, people didn't care 20 years ago. I'm just going to dump all this shit out. He hits the button. It's right next to him in the cockpit or driver's seat. Like I read the whole thing on this. Like he says he accidentally may have hit it with his elbow. So it's one of those things where he released it. But at the
Yeah, and then
exact
he yelled, "Oh shit!"
Yeah.
at the exact same time that this tour boat is underneath him. So 800 pounds of the finest Dave Matthews stool and urine that money can buy, 120 passengers in the boat below, and 2/3 of them, so that means 80 of them, were on the top deck, as you would be for like a Big Apple tour. You know what I mean? Double-decker buses and
Just
shit.
so the thought of it is just so gross, especially what they eat on those buses.
They get fucking dumped.
You know,
800
like, oh, God.
pounds of chemical waste just fucking hits them in the head.
In their mouths, in their eyes.
Could you imagine?
Yeah.
And then it just
Gotta be-
floats downstream, a slick on the top
Yeah.
for miles.
Of all
Yeah.
the things that can happen to you besides dying, that's got to be up there, right?
Oh, has to.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Or
rape's pretty
being
bad.
known as that guy that got dumped on.
Yeah, I think rape is pretty bad too. The boat
always
immediately
that.
returned to dock where all the passengers were issued refunds. You think? Right? Maybe a free T-shirt? 5 passengers were taken to Northwestern Memorial Hospital for testing. 5 passengers were taken to Northwestern Memorial. And according to the Attorney General of Illinois, passengers aboard include persons with disabilities, a couple of elderly people, 1 pregnant woman, and 1 small child, and also 1 infant. I don't know what the distinction between a small child and an infant is. And all of them got shit on. Yeah, it's fucking crazy.
That part's less funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fucking
The
Jerry.
filing by the Attorney General describes the incident. The liquid waste was brownish yellow in color and had a foul, offensive odor. The liquid human waste went into passengers' eyes, mouths, hair, onto clothing and personal belongings, many of which were soaked. Some of the passengers suffered nausea and vomiting as a result
God.
of exposure to the human waste. It's crazy. And I'll tell you what, you talk about how great America was back then. The boat's deck was swabbed by the crew and service was resumed for the scheduled 3 o'clock tour.
Respect.
Nothing's holding us back, man.
Yeah.
Let's get
We gotta
let's
get
these
these-
guys out. Here's your money back. Let's get that fucking money in.
These
Is
architecture
there a
tours.
smell up here? No, it's the fucking.
Yeah, that's gonna linger.
Yeah. So what's the fallout for that if that happens today? What's the fallout if
A lot
80
more than what it
people-
was back then. They got off easy. They
If
got
they're-
off
80
cheap.
people get shit on, literally shit on by Dave Matthews, right? If people, right? Like that's a fat cat. I know you can probably go after the driver only. Dave has some degree. I'm thinking millions.
At least, I mean, from a
80
mental,
people?
Like, I don't think I'd be able to get that image out of my head.
You
like
punch
the smell out of my nose.
You punch me in the face, I'm not suing you. You shit in my mouth, I'm
Ugh.
suing your ass.
And
I'm
my baby's mouth?
Yeah.
Or my
So
wife who's pregnant.
Yeah.
Like, oh my
I
God.
took my pregnant wife, my grandma, my infant, and my small child, and all of us had the 19-year-old drummer for Dave Matthews shit in our fucking mouths.
You must have settled, right? Out of court.
I'm going
No,
to tell you,
wait.
the
Okay.
driver of the bus was
crazy.
sentenced to 150 hours of community service and was fined $10,000.
Huh.
$10,000.
I'm sure Dave covered that.
Dave Matthews donated 50 grand to the Chicago Park District, 50 grand to Friends of the Chicago River, and paid the state of Illinois $200,000 in a settlement.
Those-
That's
Yeah.
a settlement.
Talk about getting off easy.
Well, yeah, but
right?
those crooks in Illinois, they fucking
Oh, I
stole that
know.
money.
Oh,
that,
fucking
that's-
Blagojevich.
that
I was gonna say,
city-
wasn't
yeah.
Blagojevich
Oh,
there then?
yeah.
Yeah.
What do they call it? The Chicago way?
Yeah. Yeah, we've talked about how fucking dirty Chicago politicians are.
Yeah.
So Dave Matthews got away with cutting a
those.
check for a grand total, even if he covered the fine, $310,000.
It's still under 500 grand. Like I would think it would have been millions.
So did they do something where they prevented people from suing him individually?
I don't know.
Because
The,
sometimes they do that where it's like,
Yeah.
you can't do it.
the band agreed to keep a log. See, I said log. When its buses empty their septic tanks. And on August 8th, 2023, so only last year, some bullshit historical society. I say that because I can't remember. I didn't write down which one it was, but it's like zip tied on, attached a plaque to the Kinsey Street Bridge commemorating the 19th anniversary of the incident. I don't know why they wouldn't hold on until it's the 20th. But that plaque, which Vibs just ran across in a fucking tank top, reads as such. On the afternoon of August 8, 2004, at this very location, the Dave Matthews Band tour bus emptied the septic tank over the Chicago River, drenching passengers on a boat tour with 800 pounds of human poop. No one died that day, but many wish they had.
Yeah.
I tell you
Yeah.
what, when you use the word drenched in that
Yeah.
with that scenario, it's a lot worse than just getting. I mean, there's nothing worse obviously than getting it in your mouth and stuff. But
Yeah.
being drenched, you got a lot more than a little spatter in your mouth.
I feel very comfortable today.
Oh, good for you.
Kind of loose.
You
That's
look,
nice.
yeah.
I'm
You mean
happy for
you physically comfortable?
Yeah.
In that nice
Comfortable.
3-chi.
Yeah, a little 3-chi
I
hood.
Pull
thought you
over.
were a little down in the dumps.
No, I'm trying to
this
figure
is a
out what I'm
mellow.
feeling. I'm a little mellow,
right, go-
John.
go back to
Yeah,
eating
maybe
your
I got to
pizza.
get the intensity up. Maybe I'm just fucking starving. I mean, I've been in a calorie deficit since September, and John's eating fucking things here. You know what I mean?
An extra large sausage pepperoni pizza.
Yeah. I'm
You slept
close
good.
to the weight limit to jump out of the plane. I might be jumping out of the plane in about a month.
Oh, hell yeah.
I got to get down to a certain weight. So August 8th, happy Dave Matthews Band Day. Happy Dave Matthews Shit Day for all who celebrate, right?
Can you sing a little bit of Crash?
What would you say? Don't drop the big... Oh, Crash?
You got your ball. and-
By the way,
got
you just
your
ruined the rest of my
chain
day because now he's
tied
not going
to
to get this
me.
out of his head. It's like when he's
Tie
watching
me up
Rounders.
again.
And he
Who's
thinks
got
he's,
the
what's that guy's name?
clothes in you, my friend? What's that? It's open up your... What does it say?
I
Show
don't-
the world to me, right? Open up your... hack up your skirt a little more.
Yeah.
Show the world to me. So anyway, he shit on people. So that's the thought process with this
Oh my God.
fucking thing. What the fuck was Jimmy thing? Sometimes take a Jimmy thing. Just
don't know
keep
that. Oh,
it
God. See, it's not
swinging.
gonna stop
We might
all
have
day.
to do this as a niche for the fucking
DMB?
dozen, right?
Little,
The
little
tour bus
Dave?
shit show.
Yeah, a little dozen. We'll have John as our former friend. All right, so this is the thought process on how we come up with what we're doing here.
What year did Dave?
Yeah, shit all over
Right,
people.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll start rolling in a sec. So when you start to do this, it starts to conjure up stuff in my head that I remember from my childhood, and then we press it a little bit further down into history with stuff that I don't remember, and that's why we're doing the twisted history of dumping, in case you wonder what the thought process is. And I'll tell you right away, the story reminds me of the 80s, when illegal dumping harmful waste was all over the news. Reagan was president, and it was huge, stopping people from just dumping shit wherever the hell they wanted to do. I'm guilty of it still to this day. I wrote a blog maybe a couple of years ago about how one of the greatest feelings in the world is taking a good dump. And I didn't mean taking a good dump on the bowl. I meant when one of my neighbors has a dumpster in front of their house, and I can just get rid of all the fucking caustic chemicals and paint cans as before, and we'll get into maybe Simply Safe later on, but before all these cameras, doorbell cameras, at least every bag of shit I would ever clean up for my dog, right into dumpsters.
Oh, that's always nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
You toss it.
It's like a
love
rite
it.
of passage. He can't wait to toss that thing. Like he gets it in the airplane.
Yeah.
Or the helicopter.
Oh, I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a hammer toss.
Like a grappling hook. Just
Thinks he's Thor.
Yeah.
Do you ever participated in a little illegal dumping?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
100%. Yeah. I've polluted. I remember the first time I deep fried
The
it.
statute of limitations on this is life.
Oh, is it really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I'm fucked. I'll tell you one that's not that bad. I deep fried a turkey once. Deep fried a turkey multiple times. And I had, 5 gallons of this beautifully flavored fucking peanut oil. I did not know what to do with it. So this was in the old house where we lived. We had a forest behind our house. This huge fucking yard, too. This isn't a brag. It's just the way that it was. So when we walked to the end of the property over the post and rail fence, I dumped 5 gallons of flavored peanut oil into just
I had
the
no
bushes
idea, by
back
the way.
there.
I'm totally innocent of
And
all
it's-
this. I had
Peanuts are
no clue.
natural.
Yeah. I will tell you,
Explains why we had all those animals.
I woke up that night. These animals were having a fucking orgy in there.
They're
these
feral. They're
foxes.
just- yeah.
Dirty
give me a
Mike and the
fox.
boys.
Dirty Mike and the boys. Yeah, they ran a fucking whatever. It was something else.
Foxes, they screech like they just
Oh my
they howl
God.
and they screech.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When they're mating, it sounds like a woman being raped.
Yeah,
It is
it's-
disturbing.
Yeah.
You ever heard of pigs screaming? That's
Really?
Yeah.
The lambs, Clarice, how'd they sound? So-
We almost bought a pet
Sounds
pig,
good.
and it wasn't until I brought these two idiots, my wife and my daughter specifically, two exotic pets in Lodi, New Jersey, or as my son calls it, Lodi, New Jersey. And when they held these pigs, they don't like to be held. Piglets don't like to be held, and they have that.
yeah.
Yeah,
didn't
and
know.
they piss all over the place and stuff. I'm sure they can be more domesticated, but it wound up saving me thousands because I was just going to buy it and bring it home. Imagine how the world would have burnt down if I brought them home a little piglet. They would have went crazy.
I saved a bird last week. He almost had a
Oh,
connection.
fuck.
What do they call them? The ones you can keep, the teacup?
Vietnamese potbelly or
Yeah.
teacups. But a lot of times they sell, pigs
And
are...
it vibrates. It walks like, it just stands there like doing this.
Yeah.
And then it just pees like one of those guns that you fill up the clown's mouth with at the carnival.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Sup-
gross.
But they're
Or
very...
super soaker?
They
Yes.
can have babies very young pigs. So sometimes like two immature pigs will have a baby and then they'll put it on the brochure. Hey, look, this small pig and this small pig had this teacup pig. Buy it for $3,000. And then those two parents, mature to full 500-pound sows and whatnot. And then you bring home this pig and it goes. So a lot of these animal rescues, particularly that alpaca farm that we stayed above.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that?
That was cool.
They had a pig there
Roscoe,
that
New
was
York.
just fucking huge. And it was exactly that. Somebody bought it thinking it was going to be this teacup Vietnamese pocket pig or whatever. And it grew to 450 pounds. And they were like, what the fuck are you going to do? So they gave it to the alpaca farm that we go to
Yeah, she was-
up
she
in
didn't like
Roscoe,
Finn.
New York.
I've
go ahead.
illegally dumped lawn
go.
clippings. I don't know if that's. I feel like that's
You're
fine.
like a
I
renegade.
think that's not.
We
I
went
think
down by the
that's not
river. And threw it.
illegal.
This was in college, my
In the
freshman year of
river?
college. Not in the river, by the river,
That's
where
different.
no one would go.
Riverbank?
Riverbank.
You created a
well,
new habitat
The
for
forest
somebody.
in
I think that's
between
okay.
the river bank and the street, but yeah, I
You
feel like
write
that was
down the
fine. But I don't know.
Yeah.
We were young.
3 pounds of grass clippings, 5 pounds of oil. I'm
Isn't
going to
it-
go with you're good.
Isn't it illegal to burn leaves too? I think, right?
In
Yes.
some
Oh.
states.
I got that.
Some states.
So
You got in trouble for that one. I
yeah.
wasn't home for that either.
And then Annie's not home, so I'm burning leaves, and it got a little bit out of hand, and we had copper gutters on the old house, and the leaf pile was near the copper gutters, so the flames went up into the copper gutters, and it was blasting flame because they had like dried out leaves, and it was blasting. It wasn't bad. Like I didn't even have to get out the hose and it calmed down. But my neighbors called the fire department.
Yeah.
And the fire department came with an ambulance, 2 trucks. They went to the backyard. By the way, if you're tuning in, this is a history podcast.
Well,
And
they're
they-
the EMTs too, so that makes sense.
Well,
went
unless
and
you
they-
say we just need the fire department and
Yeah.
you just call 911, you get everybody.
Yeah, the cops.
They
come
went to my
first.
backyard where I have like this cowboy cauldron, this big hanging cauldron, and it had some leaf clippings in it that I had burnt, a couple of days earlier. And they hit it with the heat gun, and they were like, "There's barely any residual heat on this thing. Like this cauldron would hold it in. It's made of cast iron." I said, "Oh, I'm going to come clean." What they called you for was what I was burning in the front. And you guys walked right by it because I had cleaned it all up. They were like, "Where? Show us." So I went, and they put the heat gun on the blacktop where the fire was, and it was off the charts. Then they put it on my copper gutters. They're like, "Holy shit!"
Wow.
And
So you almost got away scot free.
yeah, and then I went inside and I sat down. Bridget and Finn, Mick wasn't home. And I said, "Listen, Mom doesn't need to know about this." And Bridget's like, "I already sent her a picture." Took a picture.
I got a picture
of
on
me
my phone
talking
of
to the
like
fucking fire
yeah,
department.
fire department,
What a
police.
fucking
I'm
narc.
like,
That's
What
what
a
we
narc.
To be fair, you narked on yourself.
I did. I kind of knocked on
Set
myself.
the tone. A little bit.
I walk in, she's like, "Daddy told us not to tell you." I was like,
Yeah.
Love
She
it.
was 2.
Yeah, daughters
Yeah.
are terrible. But anyway,
turned everything.
so this reminds me of the 80s when illegal dumping was a huge issue. I'm sure it still is. And then it brings you right back to us doing We Didn't Start the Fire, the 3-parter on We Didn't Start the Fire. And in the last episode, hypodermics on the shore, China under martial law, rock and roller, cola wars, I can't take it anymore. Hypodermics on the shore, we just gave it, I think in that episode, we had to get to like 40-something
Yeah.
references.
Those were fun.
I like
love those
that.
episodes.
That series is great. If you guys are looking just to do like a road trip, like Danielle is doing, I think putting those 3 in is a really good one. So, but when we said hypodermics on the shore, I just mentioned how they were washing up in and around the tri-state area in and around the 80s. And then I went right into China's under martial law. I think I spoke more about the cola wars than I did about this illegal dumping. So I'm going to get to it a little bit now. So what they were referring to that I never got to is actually something that was in all the New York papers, and it got a name. It got a name. It's called the Syringe Tide. It was the Syringe Tide, classified as an environmental disaster during the 1987-1988 time frame. And it happened in Connecticut, right across the bay from Long Island, New Jersey, and New York, where significant amounts of medical waste, including hypodermic syringes and raw garbage, washed up onto beaches, particularly on the Jersey Shore, but also in New York City and Long Island. And this forced the closing of beaches on the Atlantic coast, and local economies were absolutely screwed because of it, with the diminished tourism.
Oh, yeah.
So reports of medical waste and sewage spills drove away hundreds of thousands of vacationers, costing the Jersey Shore more than $1 billion in lost revenue that summer. It's a big number for 1987. It was the source of even greater turmoil than the HIV/AIDS epidemic earlier in the 1980s. More people avoided the beaches because of hypodermics and stuff like that than they did because they thought they were going to get AIDS. That's the point I was trying to make.
If I'm not mistaken, I'm about to look it up. I think that was why John Bon Jovi got his house for the low price that he bought it for.
Oh, he bought it too.
Like, I think he bought his house down in maybe, I don't think he's Rumson. I don't know. He's around there somewhere.
Yeah, something like
but he
that.
got it
Little
for like
Silver or something.
$1 million. And it was this monster property. And now it's like, well over 50. Like, I
Yeah.
think he got it at a discount because of this.
I think he doesn't pay taxes on it because he grows honey on it too, right? Was that Springsteen? One of those two has like a honey farm on it. And so it's technically a farm or something. So they get like a tax break.
That's awesome.
Genius.
Yeah, fucking genius, right? Yeah, rich stay richer. They finally determined where all this shit was coming from. And to no one's surprise, it was coming from Fresh Kills Landfill in Staten Island, which at the time was the largest landfill in the world. And it remained so until its closure in 2001. When I was growing up, Staten Island was known exclusively as a dump.
Yeah.
That's
That's
all
sad,
people knew about
yeah.
Staten Island. And it's not the first thing people talk about nowadays. When I was growing up, it was a dump.
I'm not even from the area.
Yeah.
And Staten Island is dump. That's what you know
Dump,
it as.
yeah.
That's a
Right, they put the mall on
nationwide. Yeah.
By the way, there are some neighborhoods in Staten Island that are pristine and beautiful.
Right.
There are some restaurants in Staten Island that I would put up against any fucking restaurant. Some bagel shops, pizza places, Ralph's Ices, Danino's. Can't remember the name of the bagel shop that does the prosciutto bagels. But there are some places in Staten Island that are great. But in the middle of all this, like I used to play Lotterette, the early bird back nine, every week, me and Tommy Curtis and Kevin McCarthy. And so we'd start on the 10th hole because in New York, they can't let anything go to waste.
Yeah.
So instead of starting in the morning, they would let people tee off on 1. They'd let people tee off on 4. You'd all drive out to the hole. They'd blow the whistle, and everyone would tee off. So the golf course was already almost filled. There was no wasted real estate. So you could do the early bird back 9, which is what we would do. There was the early bird rabbit, I think it was called, where you would tee off on like 13 and only get in like 5 holes and shit like that.
Yeah.
I would drop you off at like 5 in the morning.
Yeah, so I spent a lot of time in Staten Island because, the Guinea Gangplank, the Verrazano Bridge right over in Staten Island was so close to where we were in Bay Ridge. Staten Island was known for the Italians too, you know what I mean? And the dump.
I've still never been. I always meant to go to see, like, what are they, Staten Island Yankees are there, right?
Oh.
Not that I'm a fan.
Are they
but
no,
I
they're not
always
the
heard-
Jaguars.
Well,
That's
may I
not
throw
correct.
you the invite? I'll get the date because you know how
I
all
always
these.
heard it was worth it, that they had like a cool little
It's a cool
ballpark.
stadium. Yeah.
So the Staten Island Yankees.
You take the Staten Island Ferry, which is very famous.
Correct.
That's why we were going to do it. I
The
lived
ferry.
in Friday.
Yeah.
Right, it doesn't make as much sense now for you, but no. I mean, just when you're in FIDA, just a great jump on that
Yeah.
ferry because it's at the ferry station,
Yeah.
or at least it used to be. I think the Staten Island Yankees still play where they used to, right by the ferry.
I think so,
It's
too.
a really nice thing. So you know how there's Heritage Night, and
Yeah.
a lot of times, like a lot of people that embrace like the Mexican American heritage, particularly some of the Southern teams and whatnot. So they turn into like luchador masks for the day.
Yeah.
Minor league teams.
Yeah, Coney Island does this too. I've been to that park.
Yeah, the
That's
Brooklyn
pretty cool.
Cyclones.
So much fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the Brooklyn Cyclones turn into like the Brooklyn Luchadors for like Heritage Night or something. The Staten Island Yankees for Heritage Night turn into the Staten Italy Gabagools. And that's the name of their thing. They sent me a sweatshirt.
Weren't you like the minor league guy for a little?
Yeah,
You were getting every hat in the book.
I love minor league. I'm not a huge baseball fan. I don't dislike it, but I love going to minor league ballparks. You get a lot for your money. The people there are playing their ass out. These kids are playing their asses out. There's always some sort of interesting food option in all these places. So we used to go like the Rockland Boulders.
Yeah.
Yeah,
On our trips back, we used to go like the Reading Fighting Phils. Finn threw out the first pitch while
Yeah,
some
dude.
guy was on an inflatable ostrich throwing
The
hot
kids
dogs.
watch the game from a pool, like out behind
Yeah.
the center
They're
field.
great for kids. And, I mean, the kids, the stuff that they do for kids too. You can meet the players. You get like
Well,
every
yeah.
autograph in the book. Yeah.
Players are like these young, handsome kids too. You know what I mean? Like there's nobody spoiled millionaires. These guys are looking to get to the show.
Easy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like dump a load on them.
And they do like low cost beer. I mean, it's
Oh,
like,
everything.
Yeah.
Irish nachos, like all this stuff. So I think I'm going to try. I'll give you the date. Well, I'm thinking I'm going to try to get to the Staten Island Gabagools game this year. I think it's in August. Might be when their Heritage Night is. The Staten Italy Gabagools. So, back to it. There was this thing in the 80s, as I had said, which was called the Syringe Tide. And I remember it very, very well. So it wound up that the landfill had seeped off into, if you ever look at what the Fresh Kills landfill, it had an entrance from the water side, and that's what sloughed off and wound up polluting essentially 3 states, which is wild. New York City had to pay $1 million for past pollution damages as well as pay for the cleanup, but no reparations were paid to business owners on the Jersey Shore for revenues lost during the months of inactivity.
Kind of
And
like
again,
Chicago, right, with Dave Matthews.
But that's
They got off
88.
easy.
Imagine that happened to the Jersey Shore now. Imagine the federal relief. They would just start printing some money and send billions down to fucking DJs. You know what I'm
DJ's
saying?
PPP load.
Yeah, exactly. Graders, fries,
Bar A would
whatever.
be-
Yeah, exactly. The frozen custard place that I love was the creamsicle one.
Cream and cone, was that?
No, cream and cone was
that's
out in the
Nantucket,
Cape.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
I can't keep up with all of your food places.
Yeah. So that's what that was. That's what I remembered, the Syringe Tide, and I know it's not as big as Billy Joel, but a Canadian electro-industrial band named Skinny Puppy. You guys have never heard of Skinny Puppy. Please tell me you never heard of them
No.
because I know them and I think they're pretty obscure. They wrote a 1988 song called "Hospital Waste" about the incidents. Terrible song.
I was gonna say, wow, sounds like a real banger.
Oh no!
Can't wait
So
to play that one.
This is like Ministry and Knights of Reb and like kind of Nine Inch Nails type, early Nine Inch Nails type stuff. Skinny Puppy. I used to fuck with them for some reason. There was an episode in The Simpsons back then when Principal Skinner sent Milhouse to the beach to pick up all the medical waste that's washed up on the shore, and Milhouse accidentally pricked himself on a syringe. And Skinner said to him, "Well, just keep working. You'll prick yourself with the antidote sooner or later." Sort of mocking the syringe tide that was going on at the time.
This reminded me of, when we were doing this one, reminded me of Hart Island. Remember when
Yes.
the body started to seep
Yeah.
out
Yes,
from underneath
exactly.
the island?
Yeah. And if you want any more information on Skinny Puppy, I will tell you that they were one of the bands that used to get pumped into the detainment cells at Guantanamo Bay to drive people fucking crazy.
Yeah.
Your Skinny Puppy on 11 for 23 hours a day.
How is that what they picked? Like, do you know? Like,
Yeah, I could think of some
is
stuff.
it just that bad?
Someone's
It's
kid
not
listens to it
not
and they're like,
bad,
"This
but
is
it's got that
awful."
droning techno, that early techno industrial beat that is tough to close your eyes and block out.
Got it.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if they were playing some Dave Matthews, you know what I mean? Satellite
Guantanamo Bay would be the
strong by the moon.
most
Oh, God.
chill place on earth.
Yeah.
You want to go hang out
Yeah,
there.
exactly.
Smoke some weed.
Get some 3 chi up
Yes,
there.
exactly.
Sit around.
I want to see you and have you and Willie ever done some karaoke?
I've only done karaoke a couple of times, and I pured karaoke
Yeah.
down in West Virginia.
Yeah.
Were you there?
No.
Oh, I killed it.
But I,
man.
I thought you would be good.
Yeah. If you guys want to do a Twisted History karaoke night, I am more than down.
I've gotten booed off a karaoke night.
Oh.
I'm the worst.
That's impossible.
No.
Where
no.
were you?
Not.
Chili's or something?
What? No. Just at any place.
Oh.
Yeah, you could have been in a school for the deaf. It's tough. We had like a game like
Listen,
the
I know my lane, and it's not the
PS
singing
fucking
one, so
3
I'm
or
good.
something.
If
There was a thing that you had the headset, and as long as you kept the pitch anywhere near
Right.
the bars, you would do it. And it was all like, I would swallow my pride, I would choke on the ride. It wasn't like Adele and shit like that. It was like
Right.
90s rock. And we were drunk, and we had my cousin and his wife were over, right? We were hanging out. Shout out
Irish
David
brogues,
and
and I
Veronica.
get, and I'm the one that gets
My
booed
cousin
off.
has such a heavy fucking Guy Ritchie accent too, and he was,
Killing it.
yes, like when you do the video games, like the dancing ones, and they're like superstar and all that shit. And then he got on, they were like, "Boo!" The
Yeah.
fucking crowd
That's-
at the
There wa-
thing.
Yeah, it was a tough room.
If
Yeah.
you can't sing well, you got to be a good showman. You
Yeah,
gotta get
yeah.
the
I do
crowd
everything
involved.
else pretty good.
You
Well,
gotta
more
Or
than
do
that.
the
Well, not
faux
cooking. I can't cook.
voice.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
exactly.
should have
That's
lip
hard to
synced
do
is what
for
I
a
should have
whole
done.
song, though.
Oh, it is. It's tough to do. I have one song that I do, and I put it myself when.
The
I-
Tenacious D song?
Yeah, fuck her gently.
right.
I do that better than anybody.
Yeah.
I'm very good at it. I play crowd work, the whole deal.
Yeah. I feel like we could get people to pay for you and Willie to do.
Yeah.
Just come.
You
sing
should
for
say,
Oh,
oh,
so-
just come out in the backyard one night.
Yeah.
You'll
Yeah.
have a ball.
Yeah.
These 2 idiots back there
Or Za.
singing to Centipede.
Me, Za, yeah, Centipede
Za is
by Reby Jackson. Centipede.
you and Za with that one song
Fucking
from Enrique
Bailando?
Iglesias. What's his name?
Bailando. Za singing it?
He's-
Panosina, Frasina, Potina, Potina,
pointing.
Pasina,
He's
Pasando,
got
pipes.
Pasina,
He's got
Pasando.
some
Yeah.
Za is one of my favorite people. So Willie is on the road. He comes back mid-July, and he says that where he is now as far as contracts and stuff, he thinks he'd be able to do a Twisted History of Barstool Breakfast.
Love that.
So I think we do it in there. We just drink and eat.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just talk about what had happened,
Hours.
all that stuff. Yeah,
Those
just
were
do a
so much
marathon
fun.
one. That would blow these fucking beer Olympic case
Yeah,
race
and then
bullshits out of the
1
water.
hour of karaoke.
1 hour of karaoke. Yeah.
Would you and Willie ever be a team in a drinking competition? I feel like you guys would crush.
Yeah, I
There'd be,
think
there'd be no
it's,
competition.
it's not like I see that the way these guys, and I love them all. I wrote a blog saying how the beer games is an excuse just for guys to hug each other with their shirts off.
Yep.
Yeah, and it really is. If you just look at stills from gay porn and stills from the beer Olympics, there really isn't much difference.
Not just stills.
Yeah, yeah,
similar.
still.
Yeah.
It's the
I
polar
said-
bear thumbnail.
Yeah, I said they went after Dan like fucking Andy in the laundry room in Shawshank. Remember when the girls were on it?
sisters, the girl- yeah,
sisters,
the sisters.
yeah. Which is totally cool. Like, and I thought it was maybe me, but I had to block it on Twitter because I'm like, is it going to get to a point where I'm masturbating to a bunch of guys playing flip cup? I don't need that.
You already
Right?
got Nate. You got Nate.
I got Nate. Yeah, exactly. So we're probably gonna do that. But anyway, Fresh Kills has been shut down. It got shut down early in 2001, but it got reopened after 9/11 in 2001. It was temporarily reopened as a sorting ground for roughly a third of the rubble from Ground Zero. I mean, I know we talk about 9/11 all the time. We're actually going to close this podcast with kind of a 9/11 story, but there was so much stuff, right? Like when 2 buildings fall, it's a lot. When 200-story skyscrapers fall, it's a lot. So they had to like bring all this stuff to be sorted through. I don't mean to get too personal, Annie, but to find remains of people like Annie's dad, you know? So one of the places that took a third of this, a third of 2 skyscrapers, was Fresh Kills.
And
So
every
it was
time the
cool.
trucks would leave Ground Zero, they would always have, like when they would drive through Staten Island, they would always get a police escort and people would just line up.
Yeah.
And just always, like,
yeah,
until they
applaud them.
closed it.
Yeah.
It was pretty respectful.
Thousands of detectives and forensic evidence specialists worked for over 1.7 million hours collectively. 1.7 million hours at Fresh Kills, trying to recover remnants of people killed in the attacks. At final count, 4,257 human remains were retrieved. That's how many mandibles and hip bones and this and that were retrieved. But only 300 individual people were identified from those 4,200 remains.
I think that's because I think people don't realize the high number of people who didn't want to know.
And I will tell
I think
you,
that gets overlooked, and I think that's important.
if somebody listens to that last sentence I just had spewed, thousands of detectives, 1.7 million man hours, only to find 300 identifiable remains, they might say it's a lot of time for not a lot, but finding the remains and giving these people closure, I mean, that's 1.7 million hours well spent. So, you know, as much as I was shitting on Staten Island being a dump and all that stuff, when they opened up Fresh Kills, it was especially a boon.
And you said some people didn't want to know. What
Yeah,
what
there
was
were
the
a lot of
reasoning
people.
for that? Do you
I know a lot of people, they just didn't, they felt that their spouse, their son, their daughter passed away on 9/11 at Ground Zero, and that's where their remains are, and the thought of them being carted off to Fresh Kills or somewhere else, they just
dump.
felt like,
yeah.
you know, I'd rather think of my loved one there, only there, and, you know, being buried with whatever they died with. They just did not. And it was hard for a lot of the families because we had a couple that were in our circle, and like some of the spouses didn't want to know, but the parents did.
Yeah.
So it was like a push-pull, like, but it's my kid. I want my kid's remains. I want to bury them. And then the spouse would be like, well, I don't.
It's like the,
that, you know, it was hard.
The Terry Schiavo, like, pull the plug or keep
Yeah.
her alive
Correct.
kind of
Yeah.
debate. Where,
Or frozen embryos.
yeah.
Like, I don't want them
Exactly.
anymore. Well, I want them. You know what I mean? No, they were mine. Like, I will
Next
tell
of kin
you.
was a big thing. I think it was you could probably do a twisted history of next of kin issues because
Yeah.
you'd be amazed at how many of those situations come up. You'll be like, oh, I would never think of it from that perspective.
Yeah.
I call it oftentimes because I don't think there's a better way to call it. It's like a morbid jigsaw puzzle when they started to find pieces of my father-in-law. And so even we had said, that's enough for us to cremate and put into a plot. You don't have to do that anymore. Every family was given an urn with
Yeah.
ash from 9/11. So you technically had something that, you know, was kind of remain-ish.
Right.
But, you know, like I said, 44,000 pieces in Staten Island, 300 went to the families. The other, you know, 3,900 were just buried.
And they kept,
you know
the
what I
thing
mean?
was, is that they kept every cargo unit that they carted out, like they identified it, like they would write on the side of it where it was from. So like for our situation, they found when they went under the North Tower, like they were using it as a ramp, and then they went underneath. My dad was found in the elevator shaft underneath. But when they did that one elevator, they kept it, they compartmentalized it, and they logged it as such. So when they contacted us, well, I called them, and they got 8 hits for him. They were together in this one container, and they knew exactly where it was. So they could have sifted through the entire thing. But the fact that they got 8 basically from, you know, jawbone down to ankle bone, but 8 hits in between, like you kind of knew, like he was,
Right.
you know, that was where he was. But so like I didn't need them to go through like I don't need these people sifting and just so they can get every single I mean,
Right.
It
After a while, you
Right.
just want to turn it off.
You just want to.
You know what I mean?
100%.
Yeah, you don't want to.
Yeah.
Every
But
time like
his
a
wife-
212 number hit, we were like, "Fuck, what is
My
this?"
stepmonster wanted to know nothing. Like she
Yeah.
was just like, yeah, I don't care. She was, and that was just a personality thing. But there were so many different families that had just like these difference of thought process and feelings and religions. Religion was another big thing about it.
Yeah.
Some people were furious their child was cremated if they didn't believe in cremation.
Right.
So it was tough.
I'm going to kick it back to the 80s because I just told you guys 87, 88 for the Syringe tide. At the same exact time, so at 87, I was 16 years old. That's why I remember it so vividly. So 1987, there was also this thing called the Gar Barge. There was this gigantic barge that had left New York City and was going to, I forget where it was going to, North Carolina. And North Carolina was going to incinerate the garbage on this barge and then get rid of the ash. So they load up this gigantic barge, takes off from New York City. I'll read you the story. So this is 1987. This is all dumping from my fucking my childhood. This giant
You're going
barge.
to say my backyard because it really was kind of
Yeah.
our backyard.
Yeah, and we saw the barge.
Yeah.
Like the barge was like docked offshore so many times. It was a fascinating news story. It was just reoccurring. So it was filled with garbage that nobody would agree to incinerate because a rumor spread that 16 bundles of trash on the barge contained hospital gowns, syringes, and diapers containing various contaminants that infected the entire load of 3,100 tons of trash. So there was over 3,000 tons of trash on this fucking giant barge. And it didn't help that the barge was chartered, at least in part, by Long Island mob boss Salvatore Avellino. So nobody trusted its contents. As a result, the barge sailed up and down the eastern seaboard between New York and Belize in Central America. It left New York, went to North Carolina, and North Carolina said, we changed our mind. Nope. So they said, all right. They headed around Florida. They tried to have it incinerated in Alabama, Floribama. Nope. They tried to do it in some port in Louisiana. Nope. They went to Belize in Central America. Can't help you. The Mexican authorities had closed the waterways further down towards South America. So this thing had to climb back up the eastern seaboard. And it's a barge, right? So people would see it on its thing. So it did this from March of 1987 until July before finally, and again, like it was sent by a connected mobster, and somebody in Brooklyn's like, yeah, I'll take care of it. So they drove it back up to Brooklyn, and they burned 3,000 tons of garbage in Brooklyn in 1987. But this Gar Barge enchanted people. T-shirts being sold.
Yeah.
Like you and your dad went out on
Yeah,
the
we
boat.
took the boat out to go.
They went
go
on the
check it
boat
out.
and they like people would go out to the boat and just take pictures of the fucking barge. I mean, it was stupid.
It's like
It was-
the loneliest whale. It's just like kind of swimming
Yeah.
around
Well,
on its own.
barges are
and-
so flat. I was just looking because I was curious. Like they can't go out to sea, so they have to stay inland.
Yeah.
Like, they can't navigate. Like they don't have a bow of a boat. Like,
They,
they don't
they
have
have
the
to be
ability
relatively
to.
close to shore.
Right,
Yeah.
they stay inland, so like they right off the coast.
everyone-
so this
everyone
thing was
sees it,
just,
yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. Like we had to go check it out.
But it was I don't know what the
smelled so bad.
typical like the Hawk Tour girl. We were the Gar Barge. Like you know what I mean?
That was yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if my parents were
Spit
like,
on
"Hey,
that
come on,
thing.
we're gonna go see the Gar Barge," I'd be like, "I don't know."
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a thing.
Yeah.
it was fucking stupid.
Yeah. That
nobody
Well, we had
wanted.
nothing else to do because you couldn't go to Jersey Shore because Staten Island had thrown with syringes.
All the
there.
syringes,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So
So it passed the time.
yeah. So when they got to Brooklyn, they did incinerate the whole thing, and the 3,100 tons turned into 430 tons of ash that remained, and that was added to a landfill out in Islip, out on the island. But the biggest was the Bhopal gas tragedy, which was a chemical accident in December of 1984. 1984, so we're still right around this time, my formative years. And it was at a Union Carbide pesticide plant in India in what's considered the world's worst industrial disaster. I'll get to what Union Carbide was, but I don't know how much familiarity people who are listening to this know with Union Carbide. But Union Carbide was a comp of General Electric back in the day. It was in the Dow. It was an absolute household name, like an IBM and stuff like that. It doesn't exist anymore. But so Union Carbide, over 500,000 people in a small town surrounding this plant, this Union Carbide chemical plant, were exposed to highly toxic gas called methyl isocyanate. the government of Madhya Pradesh confirmed that a total of 16,000 deaths were related to this gas release, and it left an estimated 40,000 individuals permanently disabled, maimed, or suffering from serious illnesses, making it the world's worst industrial disaster. Following the incident, the victims in Bhopal filed a U.S. $10 billion injury claim against Union Carbide. $10 billion. That's more like it. Additionally, the government of India filed its own $3.3 billion claim against the company. And in 1989, right, so that's 5 years later, the company paid only $470 million to the Indian government as a final settlement. So they got sued for $13 billion, and they paid $470 million.
They settled, but that I tell you what, 5 years for a lawsuit that big,
Yeah.
that's actually kind of quick.
It
I
is.
thought you were,
Yeah.
I thought it would have been closer to 15 years.
The appeal process wasn't like it was now, you know what I mean? But Carbide always insisted that the accident was an act of sabotage by a plant worker. The plant site has not yet been cleaned up. It's 2024, and hazardous chemicals can still be found in the now abandoned site some 40 years later.
That's crazy,
Right? And I'll tell you again, Union Carbide was huge. So this was a big, big headline. During the Cold War, Union Carbide was active in the field of rocket propulsion, research and development for aerospace, and guided missile applications. It was part of the Dow, as I had said, Dow Industrial Average, and it made names that everyone's heard of. Ever-Ready and Energizer batteries. We've all known about those. They were originally made by Union Carbide. Glad bags, right? Garbage bags. Simonized car wash. Prestone antifreeze. They were all Union Carbide type stuff. But after the Bhopal disaster, Carbide was the subject of repeated takeover attempts. In order to pay off its debt, Carbide sold many of its familiar brands, and finally Dow Chemical announced the purchase of Carbide in 1999. The deal was consummated in 2001 and valued at $11.6 billion. So Dow Chemical was able to buy them for pennies on the dollar.
And have no responsibility for the cleanup.
Yeah, no,
Not that they
yeah.
should, but I mean,
Yeah.
you'd think that would have been something they would have.
But again, 1984, you want to talk about, a news cycle that was,
Yeah.
everybody covered this thing. We're going from hypodermics on the shore to the gar barge to thousands of people dying in India.
The 80s rocked.
80s, yeah, they're pretty fucking filthy, the 80s. So when we're talking about dumps, just one of the things Annie had sent me, the largest dump in the world is called Bantar, Gebang, or Gebang.
And
I
this
don't know.
blows my
Gebang,
mind because
yeah.
of its location.
Yeah,
Like,
so
that's
it's
what
in-
I found so fascinating
Yeah,
about it.
it's located just outside of Jakarta, Indonesia, and it's the largest dump in the world. It can be seen from space. It's 15 stories high, 200 football fields long in size. It accepts 7,000 tons of garbage every day from Jakarta and provides a livelihood to thousands of poor families located around its base. Scavengers, including children as long as 5 years old. And they scour daily through massive heaps of garbage to look for cardboard, plastic, wood, and even bones. They sell bones to jewelry makers. They make somewhere between $2 and $10 a day, but face the possibility of illness, landslides, or coming too close to the bulldozers, dropping massive amounts of waste across the site daily. I tell you to Google the shit out of stuff. Bantar Gebang, Bantargebang, and you see that there are literally thousands of poor people, Indonesian people, that wait as these dump trucks are on 15-story high piles of garbage, dumping more garbage, and they're rifling through it like cranes are dropping tons of garbage right next to them. It's fucking crazy.
No wonder
And
why
these people have given up.
It's no wonder they find bones, right? Of
Yeah,
course they do.
People gave up livelihoods as like rice paddy workers and whatnot because they said, we never knew crops and all, but there's always going to be garbage to go through. And so, and there's a stigma to them, right? That a lot of the kids who work in these dumps, are called like garbage babies and stuff because they show up to school smelling like garbage and all that kind of shit. But Bantar Gebang, it's been in headlines. Leonardo DiCaprio tried to get it shut down, so if he can't do it, nobody can.
Yeah.
I can't
So
help
it's
but
just
think
Maybe
of like
that's
the
where I've seen it
tsunami.
before.
Though.
Yeah.
Like if when the tsunami hits Indonesia,
And it
what
just
happens
gets all
to
picked up
like
in
where
there
does it
and
go?
yeah, 100%,
Into the
yeah.
big black
See this
hole in
fucking
the
thing
Pacific?
from space. It's like the Great Wall of China.
Is there a photo of that? Can you
Oh yeah, Bantar
Oh, yeah,
Gebang.
yeah.
Yeah, it's
From
fucking
space.
huge. Yeah. I may have misspoke because Bantar Gebang is the largest landfill on Earth, but technically it's not the biggest dump. that title goes to the Pacific Ocean. More specifically, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch.
Yeah. It's like 3 Texases
patch.
or something.
Yeah, it's the Pacific Trash Vortex.
So
Go
from
ahead.
what I remember, I don't think it like floats like an island.
No.
It's like all like particles and stuff, and it's like
Microplastics and
below
stuff,
the surface.
It's below the surface, but it is visible. Like when the water is clear, you can see what you had said. It's 90 feet deep and nearly twice the size of Texas, all in one area of the Pacific Ocean. And circulating ocean currents gather up all the trash in the surrounding ocean and creates this aquatic dump right in the middle of the North Pacific. And it's absolutely huge. One thing I'll say before I go about Indonesia, not to backtrack. I don't know if people know a lot about Indonesia, but smoking is huge there. That's one of those tidbits that we've spoke about maybe once or twice before.
That video, like the 5-year-old kid smoking the cigarette,
Exactly.
is
One of
where
your
it comes
first
from.
I love that kid.
Smoking it like he's the
I love that
fucking
chubby
in a
little son
dive
of a
bar,
bitch, yeah.
just being the man.
The $100 billion tobacco industry in Indonesia is virtually unregulated, with grade school-age children as a prime target. It's common for males to start smoking as early as 6 years old. And Indonesia's tobacco industry is one of the world's largest producers of the leaf and has the second largest cigarette market. I said second largest because nobody can touch China. I think China is at a point now where 40% of people smoke. China is
Damn.
they are fucking
Yeah.
chimneys. The industry in Indonesia employs between as many as 17 million people in farming the leaf, trading, transportation, advertising, and manufacturing, making it the second largest employer in Indonesia after the Indonesian government. And that Indonesian government relies heavily on the tobacco industry for employment and tax revenue. So nearly 40% of all Indonesians smoke cigarettes. That's a huge number. It's a huge number of 40%. I misspoke saying I think 20% of Chinese smoke, or like 22%, but it's such a bigger number as far as, population-wise, that China is number one with a lit cigarette. Where are we going to next? Let's go back a little bit, but still during my lifetime, and that's the Great Michigan Pizza Funeral of 1973. If you're going to have something called the Great Pizza Funeral of 1973, I got to know about it. That's the only reason why I looked into this, because I think it's such a cool fucking name.
Yeah, my ears perked up. I'm interested.
Yeah, the Great Michigan Pizza Funeral of 1973, Vibs. There was this dude. His name was Mario Fabrini, which sounds as Italian as all get out, but I think he might be from like Albania or something like that. So on March 5th, 1973, Mario Fabrini, an immigrant and owner of a pizza company, held a funeral for about 30,000 frozen pizzas. Fabrini had one of the biggest pizza factories in the U.S. with a capacity to produce 45,000 pizzas every week. But in 1973, the FDA was testing some mushrooms. There was canned mushrooms from a plant in Ohio, and they reported the presence of botulism. So those mushrooms, through a chain of products, were being sold to Fabrini, and he was told to recall any pizzas made with the mushrooms. Johnny just had a pizza with mushroom. While we're doing a podcast about mushrooms on pizza, Johnny just completed a slice with mushrooms.
Mushrooms on pizza.
Yeah.
Ugh.
It was the largest pizza recall in the history of the
Chewy,
world at the
gross.
time, but the FDA never confirmed any illnesses linked to the pizzas themselves. This was an investigation on the canned mushrooms. It wasn't something investigative. I had a Fabrini's pizza. I got sick. Why? Mm-hmm. So they had been told to destroy 30,000 frozen pizzas that contained stuff from this mushroom plant. So this guy, Fabrini, said, let's try to make some lemonade and we'll turn it into something. Several hundred people showed up at the funeral as truckloads of over 30,000 pizzas were tipped into an 18-foot grave. They dug an 18-foot trench. They filled it with 30,000 frozen pizza. I put a picture in there of it. It's a terrible black and white pizza, but you can just see thousands of pizzas sliding off this fucking flatbed while Annie's dad looks on.
Garbage, don't care about. Pizza funeral, all for
All
it. You
about
take
it.
me to see that, I'll show up.
The governor of Michigan, his name was William Milliken at the time, showed up delivering a homily on courage and then stuck around to eat some pizza that Fabrini was making fresh at the
It really
event.
does look like my dad.
It does. At the end of the funeral, Fabrini himself laid 2 flower garlands on the burial site. One was made of red gladioli, representing the sauce, and the other was white carnations, representing the mozzarella cheese.
I love that.
Fucking good on him, right?
Italian.
Yeah.
Yeah. And here's the kind of happy ending. Turns out, after all that, the FDA was dead wrong. The mushrooms did not have botulism. The testing, which consisted of lab tests on mice, was just incorrect. So Fabrini sued and eventually won $211,000. But Papa Fabrini Pizzas still went out of business in the early 80s, and Mario Fabrini had a nice run after that, passing away in February of last year at the age of 91.
Wow.
And I hope to fucking God somebody laid, right, red gladiola and
would
white
hope.
carnations
we
on
can
his
raise
thing.
a road trip. Let's go.
Yeah, I mean, they had to have, right? All right, so that was the great pizza, the great Michigan pizza funeral
He
of
was Yugoslavian,
1973.
by the way.
He was
fled
Yugoslavian,
yeah.
okay. When they buried 30,000 frozen pizzas in a Michigan field in an 18-foot grave.
He got more than Dave Matthews gave.
Yeah. Yeah, you get more for destroying 30,000 pizzas
They're getting drenched
than
in the
Dave
mouth with
Matthews
shit.
shitting in your mouth. Yeah.
Before you
ahead.
move on to the ad that we have to do, it's funny you mentioned botulism because I defrosted salmon the other day it was flash frozen in Ziploc, like a sealed bag. And they say you're not supposed to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You're supposed to take it out of the bag. So anyway, I was Googling it and I was like, oh no. It's like, what the fuck is botulism?
Oh, poodles.
I was fine. I survived.
Yeah,
So
no,
if
you look
you're
good.
out there and you're defrosting your salmon, you have to take it out of the zip.
I would have thought you would have put it in warm water in it.
Yeah,
I
same.
always did
No,
that.
I
never.
feel like I do that too.
Some people speed
is
up
why I don't
defrosting
cook.
by putting stuff in warm water, but
Yeah.
it's not the way it
But you
is.
can't just stick it in the fridge apparently because it's zero oxygen environment, which is
I
what
would have done that too.
botulism.
The
This is
human
why I
body's
don't cook.
resilient. I'm still kicking. I'm still here.
Yeah, my
Yeah, it
kids
was
survived.
Yeah, we're all
Those nights
fine.
when you were out and not
You
cooking.
can't do
and left it
anything
alone
now.
for me.
Sometimes you just everything's out to kill you. There's this toxin out there
Yeah.
trying to kill me.
Unless you're Dave
Mushrooms.
Matthews, then you do whatever the fuck you want, right? Let's move on. But first,
Tell you
Simply
what,
Safe.
Before you said that, I can't believe they didn't bring up this Dave Matthews story with all that going on in Chicago, right? Weren't they going to go swim in the Chicago River just recently? The mayor was going to do it, but there was-
No, that was
wasn't it?
actually Paris.
Yeah, Paris, France.
Oh,
for
it
the
was
Olympics.
Paris
Oh,
for the
disregard.
Olympics,
Right.
which,
It's
by the
actually a
way,
great
I
shit
thought it was
story.
Chicago.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
an idiot.
Yeah,
Sorry.
so,
Disregard, cut that out.
little preview, Donnie
Yep.
is going over to the Paris Olympics, and John, who shoots a lot of the foreign stuff with Don, including that time he was an 8-iron away from Ukraine for a month, but nobody gave a shit during the war.
That was
So he's
wild.
going over to film some stuff in Paris, and Paris spent like millions upon millions cleaning the Seine, just so they could have some events there, maybe some kayaking, some shit. And so the mayor of Paris and Macron, who was president of France, had said they would both swim in the Seine to prove how clean it was, and then they would do it on June 26th, I think, yesterday.
Yeah.
Probably
And
the
so a bunch
sorry,
of people who were protesting. Do you know about this?
Probably the triathlon.
Yeah, maybe,
People
like,
swimming in
yeah.
there, being in there. But yeah, yeah.
Do you
I
know
heard
about
Yeah,
this?
yeah, yeah. the
So a
protest-
bunch of people who are protesting had gotten together and they planned to shit in the Seine before en masse, like hundreds of people,
That's crazy.
thousands of people, and they also gave like title charts or whatever you would call it. So let's say you lived 2 miles upstream. They would give you the exact time for you to shit in the Seine, so it would kind of get there when everyone else was. Like
Did
you
Dave
might have had
Matthews
to
get the
shit
memo?
like two hours earlier, and it would float by Macron exactly at noon. Like you know what I'm
The
saying?
French or something.
They really are. Yeah.
'Cause
So-
they were
Here, I
mad
thought it was
that the
Chicago. I
funds
apologize to
Yeah.
the Chicagoans.
We're not used
You
for
know?
programs that they wanted to.
Correct.
and,
Yeah.
But it would be going a little backwards to shit in the
good,
Seine
right?
after they just cleaned it.
Yeah, but I saw they took like all the locks down. Like, have you ever been to?
Yeah, the lock
It's been in there for a
Lock
while.
bridge?
But
Well,
it's
that
not
was gonna,
open.
like, fall over.
Shouldn't
right?
be open.
Yeah, but still, they shouldn't have done it. You guys doing nerd ropes?
We're snacking.
This is like a fucking picnic. I'm glad.
Anybody want a Smartie?
It's the nerds are not on the rope anymore.
They're not?
They are.
They fall. All right, so let's talk about Simply Safe real quick. It's an advanced home security system that puts you first. Simply Safe offers advanced home security, 24/7 monitoring that's accessible to all with low upfront costs and monitoring plans for less than $1 a day. With 24/7 live guard protection, Simply Safe agents can act on an alarm within 5 seconds of receiving the alarm signal, deterring intruders and dispatching police, because in a crisis, every moment counts.
Someone defecating in your side yard, you got him on camera.
Boom. I mean, we brought it up before, but like me throwing stuff in people's dumpsters in front of their house, I had to stop doing that because of Simply Safe. I know I tell the story about me seeing Annie getting attacked by the dog because of Simply Safe, so we were able to show it to the cops. It was very, very cool.
Kind of.
No, it was cool that we were able to get that. like, so you didn't feel like you were a crazy person. It happened exactly where you wanted to. But these doorbell stuff, like Simply Safe, is changing
awesome.
the game. Yeah. So try Simply Safe risk-free with a 60-day satisfaction guarantee or your money back. And when you purchase, you can choose how to install your system. It's easy to do it yourself. You can have a pro do it for you with a professional installation. So get an exclusive 20% off any new Simply Safe system when you sign up for Fast Protect Monitoring. Fast Protect Monitoring. Just visit simplysafe.com/twisted. That's simplysafe.com/twisted. SIMPLISAFE.com/twisted. There's no safe like Simply Safe.
It's a pretty cool item.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think it's one of those worthwhile ones. And those are the only 2 ads for today. So BetterHelp and Simply Safe. So I feel good about that. All that talk of dumping got me thinking. And I know we tend to deal with morbid here on Twisted History, and we poke fun at some aspects in and around it, but we understand how terrible the Holocaust is in particular. But how did the Germans deal with all the dead bodies that they were responsible for during the Holocaust? I mean, it's very easy to say, oh, by the way, they killed 6.1 million people. Where the fuck did all those bodies go? You know what I mean? And we know that the incinerators were working around the fucking clock. But we just said 3,100 tons of garbage created 430 tons of ash. Like, there's a lot.
Right. And they had stacks and stacks of teeth and shoes and all these things. And they were so proud of them, which is disturbing in its own right.
But we know that in concentration camps, bodies were typically incinerated in a crematoria or in open-air pyres. But I want to make sure people know this work wasn't carried out by German soldiers or guards, because I don't think I've ever mentioned this before. It was carried out by groups of Jewish prisoners called the Sonderkommando. Sonderkommando is a German word for special command unit. So it's sort of an all-encompassing word. It was used in many different contexts during the war. So Jewish Sonderkommando units in the camps should not be confused with the Nazi Sonderkommandos, which was comprised of small units of mobile killing squads who murdered Jews in mass shootings in the German-occupied Soviet Union and elsewhere. So Sonderkommando is what they called the Jews that were responsible. I'll get into it. Jewish Sonderkommando were prisoners forced to fulfill many roles in the gas chamber crematoria complex, beginning with the arrival of victims. Sonderkommando were present in the undressing area, instructing the German victims, right? They didn't have anything to do with it, to undress and how to arrange their clothing, which would later be confiscated by the SS. After the gassing was carried out by camp personnel, men of the Sonderkommando entered the gas chamber. They had to untangle hundreds of bodies, and they had to clean the now ventilated room. And then an elevator would raise the bodies to the crematorium level. There, another group would shave the hair of the victims. If they weren't shaved when they first came to the camp, they were shaved upon death because they used the hair. There was all this stuff. Why did they shave the Jews during the Holocaust? And we spoke about it. It was like a dehumanizing thing.
Right.
It made them all seem like they were the same lowly animal. But they were also stuffing pillows and upholstery with them, too. Like they were stuffing, chairs and shit like that with hair, which is fucking crazy. So they would carry out the burning of bodies in the ovens, and then the disposal of the ashes, which was usually done in rivers and ponds. They would just dump the ash of all these different bodies in rivers and ponds. Further, to destroy the evidence of mass murder, Sonderkommando were forced to exhume bodies from burial pits that were strewn all over Eastern Europe and burn those also.
So they put them in a mass grave and covered them up, and then they had to go like undig.
Go back and get rid of the evidence.
Oh yeah,
exactly. That's as well said as it can be.
By
the way, we killed 30 Jews in here, and we buried their body outside of a handball court in whatever Bergen-Belsen. Oh shit, you can't do that. Send 30 Sonderkommando Jews out to take them, bury them, and get rid of the fucking ashes, which is unbelievable. Members of the Sonderkommando were usually kept completely apart from the rest of the prisoners, either in the gas chamber complex itself or in separate barracks, but their days were numbered. Members of the Sonderkommando, it seems like a pretty good job to have if you can keep your wits about you. Nothing good was happening but at least you felt like you had a little bit of security, right? Because all these other people being put to death. I don't know how to kind of justify my thought here.
They were in the best position to get revenge on somebody at some point. Like if you could just kill one.
But the Germans knew about it. Like the Germans knew that these Sonderkommando were especially intimate in what they were doing. So they were killed regularly as well. So it was sort of a, hey, you got this job, but you got the job because the guy before you was just killed after 3 months on it. Right? Because they knew all about the final solution. They were privy to what was going on more so than anybody else in the concentration camp. And there would be liabilities, if everything in the Nazi world were to go tits up, which they did, thank God,
Seriously.
So that's it. So I will tell you, I'm going to go into Sonderkommando in a little bit about the German ones, the little killing groups. But I didn't know about that. It was just something that always kind of bugged me, where they dumped all those millions of bodies during World War II. Speaking of mass graves, remember those reports of mass graves having been dug for the COVID-19 victims in Iran, using satellite pictures as evidence? I remember it. They had all these things because Iran wasn't giving accurate COVID reports, who got it, who died from it, and all that stuff. They just didn't really give a fuck, or they didn't care to share. And so these satellite pictures had picked up these gigantic trenches that were being dug in Iran to bury these COVID bodies. And then in New York City, mass graves were prepared on Hart Island, which Andy had mentioned at the top of the show, for any influx of the dead following the rise of deaths and morgues being overwhelmed. New York City temporarily allowed for mass graves on Hart Island for unclaimed bodies. And similar graves were dug in the Brazilian city of Manaus after a large spike in deaths attributed to the pandemic. So it's not like we're out of the weeds with mass graves, even in civilized society, because we just recently had one in Hart Island for the unclaimed bodies of COVID-19, right? Mm-hmm. But all of that shit, Iran, Manaus, Hart Island, has nothing on the plague pits that were dug throughout Europe and Asia in the mid-1300s. Way back right now. Do you remember what happened in the 1300s? There's a little sickness going around.
A little Black Death.
A little Black Death, right? So there was the bubonic plague,
chestnut.
And it killed between a third and 2/3 of all of Europe. So I say that kind of flippantly, but if you knew somebody in Europe back in the 1300s, there's a good chance they were dying or dead, right? 2/3 of the people were absolutely wiped out. And so what happened was people would dig these gigantic plague pits just outside of towns because they didn't know what to do with these bodies, and they didn't know if burning them would cause the disease to go airborne and kill even more people. So as Europe was then industrialized or built up upon, so many mass graves were found from the bubonic plague. England has plague pits from the 1300s and also from later outbreaks of other diseases like cholera. And then there's a cholera pit in the great state of Indiana.
Tell me more.
Have you ever heard of a place called Arba, A-R-B-A, Indiana?
I'm going to be honest, I have not. I don't know if...
I think it might be an Amish town.
Really?
Is there an Amish country out there, kind of like Lancaster or Lancaster, depending on who you ask?
There's a lot of Amish up north.
Is
I
there?
don't know about... So this is kind of by Richmond, Indiana, which is by Winchester. Actually, from Winchester, and I've never heard of Arba.
Yeah, but it's there. I mean, it's a real place, right? You're looking at it right now?
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now on the map.
So they had a cholera
On the
pit.
Indiana-Ohio border.
Yeah, early 1800s. I think it might have been almost like an Amish settlement at the time, right? The 1800s. And 27 people had died of cholera, so they dug a plague pit, and there's 27 people, great state of Indiana, who are buried right outside of Arba. Let's go modern day mass graves, and that takes us to Guatemala. Guatemala is an absolute dump, by the way. Very high murder rate. Violence is fucking rampant. And burial grounds, cemeteries, have become full, essentially. People are dying to get in, right? So what happens in Guatemala, which I haven't seen anywhere else, is that people running cemeteries are known to order their workers to exhume bodies from plots, from graves that fall behind on their payments. So when you die and you get buried in Guatemala, go ahead.
That rules. That kind of rules.
Yeah. So when you die and you buy your grave in Guatemala, you essentially rent it for 6 years. And then after 6 years, you have to pay $24 to renew that burial plot for the next 4 years. And then after 4 years, another $24. After 4 years, another $24. This isn't a big number, but people don't have a lot of money in Guatemala.
Yeah.
And these are public
you,
cemeteries.
You just
yeah.
forget.
Yeah. And if they
I
don't,
forgot to pay the bill.
Yeah.
but if you don't pay the bill, maybe you die, right? Or maybe, your kids don't get it or something. If it doesn't, what they do is they dig you up and then they throw you in a mass grave with other people who don't pay their fucking bills. They dig up your loved one and they throw them in mass graves and then they resell the gravesite to all these other people who are dying in Guatemala.
Awful, but that's what kind of rules.
Yeah.
Good for
right?
them.
And I'm like, so has it happened 3 or 4 times?
I wonder if they reuse the coffin.
Cemetery officials say more than 2,000 bodies are exhumed every year after relatives fail to pay their required fees, which means every year, somewhere in Guatemala, a trench is dug. And 2,000 bodies are dug up, thrown in that fucking trench. Their headstones are knocked down.
That's what I mean. Like, do they use the coffin?
I don't know.
Because that takes up a lot of space.
I don't even know if they use coffins.
I was gonna
yeah,
right,
that's
but I was
true.
gonna say it would probably like decayed and degraded. And,
Yeah.
but wouldn't the body be? I guess the bones.
Well, they say that depending on the remains, they sometimes don't rebury them. Some of them they just simply throw away. Because once they're moved to a mass grave, it's not like you could say, "Oh, I came up with the $24. Where in the mass grave is Uncle Lucy?"
Go through the Rolodex.
Uncle Lucy, Uncle Louie, and they're like, "Oh, we don't fucking know. It's too late. Your uncle's gone."
Speaking of exhuming bodies, digging up bones. Randy Travis, great song.
Is it?
I'm digging up bones.
Let's go.
I'm digging up bones.
He loves it, Randy Travis.
Yeah. Did I meet Randy Travis?
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
Is that
You
Randy
called him
Travis?
the wrong name.
I know. I said something to him like,
You're like, I think, did you call him George Strait?
I said something like, "Oh, Amarillo by Morning is one of my favorite songs, Mr. Travis." He's like, "I'll make sure I tell George Strait." I'm like, "Oh, Jesus Christ."
It's hard to keep track of them all. You
It is.
got Zach Bryan, you got Luke Bryan. They're all
Zach
yeah.
Brown.
Zach Brown.
Yeah, there's a lot of Zachs and Lukes.
It's tough. It's
Yeah,
tough.
Luke Combs. I'm down in Nashville this weekend, by the way. Speaking of
You going to Kid Rock's Honky Tonk
damn right.
bar, grill,
I'm
casino,
going to
whatever
like
it's called?
some
He's
place
going to the
called.
Barstool Nashville.
I'm going Barstool Nashville on Saturday.
It's
if you
such
guys,
a great bar.
It's-
the Barstool bar down in Nashville is so much fun.
Yeah, I'll pump that now. If anyone's in and around Nashville from 4 to 6 this Saturday, myself, Spider, Glennie, Tommy, Eddie, and Chief. I don't know if White Sox Dave is going, so I'm going to say he's going to be there too. I just didn't see him on the email. But we're going to be at Barstool Nashville from 4 to 6. And then I'm heading to some place called Nudie's Honky Tonk. But it's not a nude bar.
Okay.
For a party for one of the drivers. And then also Zach Bryant is in town that
Brian,
weekend.
no T.
Yeah, Zach Bryant, I'm sorry. So a couple guys going to that. The rest of this podcast is going to be quite random because researching how Germans disposed of corpses led me down some rabbit holes. And, I love that type of shit. The first was when I made the distinction above with the use of Sonderkommando. And I said the Jewish Sonderkommando units in the camps should not be confused with the Nazi Sonderkommandos, which comprised of mobile killing squads. Typing that term, mobile killing squads, made me want to learn more, and that eventually led me to a piece of gruesome German engineering I was never familiar with, and it was called gas wagons. These were trucks re-equipped as mobile gas chambers during World War II to kill inmates of asylums, Poles, Romani people, Jews, prisoners in occupied Poland, Belarus, Yugoslavia, the Soviet Union, and other regions of German-occupied Europe. I didn't realize that instead of transporting the victims to the gas chambers were sometimes transported to the victims. And these mobile gas chambers worked on the same principles as the stationary ones. Through a rubber hose, the driver released pure carbon monoxide, CO, into the airtight container in the cab behind him. And I'm hearing first-person reports on this. The amount of clawing and scratching and banging and yelling that you would hear going on. Like sometimes you close an oven door at a crematorium and there's gigantic thick walls and you can't hear much. Wasn't like that with these fucking gas wagons. It's fucking brutal. The vans resembled moving vans. right? So they did resemble regular box trucks.
Sounds like they fashioned them after Marie Curie's X-ray van.
Yeah, sort of.
Right?
Which she used to bring out onto the battlefield.
Right.
But it looked like a box truck, like a Hertz rental car box truck,
Right.
or whatever the hell it is.
That's exactly what she
Like a
got.
tractor trailer type thing, like in the back. Is that?
It's like a
But you
U-Haul.
know what they
I think
fucking
I know what a
used to,
U-Haul, but
Yeah, but do you know what they used to paint across it? Kaiser's Cafe Gestalt, Kaiser's coffee shop for camouflage. So all of a sudden, this coffee truck would pull up. I'm going to give you like an example. It would pull up in front of like a mental hospital. Because on top of killing Jews and stuff, the Germans also killed the mentally ill, prisoners, all that kind of, right? You know, anything like that. They didn't want anything.
Gypsies.
Yeah, gypsies, all that stuff. Romani, as they like to call them and stuff like that.
Right, I think that's the correct term.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been watching a lot of Peaky Blinders. So.
They go, they go right to like these mental hospitals and then say, okay, we're going to go down to the coffee wagon and then pound these people in there, jam the door closed, turn on the gas, and just kill these fucking, sick people.
what are U-Hauls made out of? 10? Is that 10?
Yeah, like it's
like
almost like
aluminum.
yeah.
Aluminum.
Oh, yeah.
Like maybe these things were reinforced. I have no idea, but they collected patients, loaded them into vans, and gassed them while they were driving
What
away.
they do with the bodies? Just build mass graves
They
along the side
they
of
would
the
take
road?
their bodies to someplace outside of town, create giant funeral pyres, burn them, then dump the ashes in rivers and ponds.
But the noise that like aluminum makes, like the banging
Yeah.
noise, like
Yeah.
it's a loud sound.
The reason that these things were developed, by the way, was because Heinrich Himmler, I could say this with confidence, is a fucking pussy, right?
Yeah.
He had a weak stomach, and in August of 1941, SS Chief Heinrich Himmler attended a demonstration of a mass shooting of Jews in Minsk, and after which he was like, that's too much. He vomited. He vomited while he was watching it. After regaining his composure, he decided an alternative murder technique should be found. He ordered engineers to explore more, quote-unquote, convenient ways of killing, and by convenient, he meant less stressful for the killers.
Yeah.
Right? So their experiments led to the development of the gas van, which sources say were originally used in Russia as early as 1930, and through the Great Purge, where gas wagons in Russia were referred to as, look at this, dushagubka. That was the Russian word, and it translates to soul killer. Yikes.
I'll never understand how those soldiers were able to go through with
Yeah.
what
They-
they were told to do.
Yeah, in the gas chamber. But Himmler was a pussy about it, but also the soldiers were like, this is too much when they were
Yeah.
shooting them.
I don't
Like,
know
we
how
gotta
they
do
did
There's
it.
something
one
else.
soldier
I'll
that
never
didn't
get
give a
it.
single fuck, and I'm going to talk about him in just a couple of seconds. But I mentioned the Great Purge, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the Great Purge, could you do a podcast on it? You could do a series of podcasts on it because the Great Purge, it gets no shine. And the reason it gets no shine is because it ended around 1939 and a world war got in the way. But the Great Purge was not, I can't cover it all today, but this is what you need to know. Okay, this is what you need to know about the Great Purge. Because scholars estimate that the death toll for the Great Purge took place between 1936 and 1938, so 2 years. And it roughly killed somewhere between 700,000 and 1.2 million people. We only spoke about it once on this podcast, and that's when Vibs and I were talking about prisons. I don't know if you were talking on that one.
Prison, no.
Prisons, yeah.
We
Remember
did a lot of research for that one. That was
Yeah.
disturbing.
Well, we talked about the Gulag.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we were talking about how many people Stalin sent to the Gulag
Right.
during the Great Purge. So I'm going to give you the basics of it. So again, if you're sitting in a bar and somebody mentions the Great Purge, you know exactly what it is without having to memorize too much shit. There was a guy, his name was Vladimir Lenin, and he died in 1924. Vladimir Lenin was the ruler of Russia, okay? Had a big title and all that shit. It's not important. Lenin dies in 1924, and a power vacuum then opened up in the Communist Party, and a handful of established figures in Lenin's government attempted to succeed him. By 1928, 4 years later, a guy named Joseph Stalin, the party's general secretary, triumphed over his opponents and gained control of Russia. Stalin's main political adversary was a guy named Leon Trotsky, and he was forced into exile in 1929, and Stalin's doctrine of socialism in one country became party policy. Stalin was not a good guy, okay? If you're going to take anything away from that, Stalin's not a good guy. In the early 1930s, party officials began to lose faith in Stalin's leadership. He had some broad sweeping policies that just failed, particularly in agriculture and whatnot. So Stalin started the Great Purge to eliminate all these people that were talking shit about him. Anybody who challenged him from the past, and even potential opposition groups, by rounding up political opponents and either throwing them in the gulag or executing them. I say political opponents, a lot of artists, a lot of people. Like I tell you, Leonardo DiCaprio is talking out against an Indonesian fucking dump. If Leonardo DiCaprio was around in 1936 in Russia, he wouldn't have been happy with what Stalin was doing, and Stalin would have had him killed. It's as easy as that.
Right.
When you see the amount of
Right.
artists, musicians, painters, and poets that were killed during the Great Purge, as opposed to political leaders and stuff like that, who may have actually been a real threat to Stalin, it was mind-boggling. 700,000 to 1.2 million people. So that's what the Great Purge was. Again, there's a ton we can talk about here, including how much of a paranoid and murderous scumbag Stalin was. But let me just leave you with one figure from the Great Purge that I wanted to say to you, because Annie was saying how you got to be a special type of person to be able to kill innocent people, no matter how brainwashed you are. And a lot of these guys got through with drugs and alcohol, but there was one guy who really enjoyed his job, and that was Vasily, which is what I'm going to call him, Vasily Blokhin. Blokhin. Vasily Blokhin was a fucking bad man. He was Joseph Stalin's head executioner, having personally killed tens of thousands of people in his career, including 7,000 Polish officers in just under a month, in something called the Katyn Massacre, which happened after the Great Purge in 1940.
I read about this guy. I think he was killing so many people that he had to get like a special gun made because it was like
I tell you
Polish
what,
prisoners, you mean?
it's exactly that's exactly the guy I'm talking about.
yeah.
He didn't go after his own. You said Polish officers. You mean prisoners?
No, Polish officers, Polish prisoners, all that kind
Oh,
of.
he went after just everybody.
Yeah. So So
Okay.
right. So this guy. So Katyn Massacre, 1940, 7,000 Polish prisoners interned as prisoners of war, right? So they
Gotcha.
weren't necessarily people who had committed crimes. They were POWs,
Gotcha.
right? Located in the Katyn Forest, were executed. And the event's infamy also stems from Stalin's regime's orchestration of the murders and the subsequent Allied propaganda campaign, which blamed Nazi Germany for that massacre. So the Katyn Massacre is actually pretty... I'm going to have to do the Great Purge at some point because I got to get into this. But so this is what happened. In a month, 7,000 Polish prisoners of war, political prisoners, were killed.
Well, I thought so because
People blame the Nazis.
They'll use
Yeah.
officers to help them carry out their cause,
Yeah.
and then kill them after the fact. Kind of like the people you were talking about. I can't think of the name. The long words. Sonderkommando people. And then kill them
Sonderkommando.
afterward.
Yeah. So 7,000 Polish people were killed in a month. And what I think is extraordinary about this, extraordinary in the most way that it's defined, it's crazy to think about it. They're basically killed by one man. Here's an account from a witness, and this account is about Vasily Blokhin. Along with a team of about 30 NKVD men from Moscow. NKVD was the Russian secret police, mainly drivers and prison guards. Vasily Blokhin arrived at the NKVD prison in Kalinin and set himself up in a soundproof cellar. This room in the cellar had a sloped floor for drainage. And when he got there, he put on his special uniform. It was a leather cap, a long leather apron, and elbow-length gloves. That's turned into like a Saw movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? When somebody puts on the fucking gloves.
That's some serial killer shit.
Yeah, exactly. It's like Dexter.
Yeah.
Right.
A girl with the dragon tattoo.
Yeah.
He has that special basement
exactly.
for torturing.
Yes.
Right? This didn't he didn't just do this one random Tuesday. He prepared for this.
Soundproof cellar room with a sloped floor with good drainage for blood. Get me my leather hat, my leather apron, and
He had
my
requests,
my gigantic gloves. And then on the table next to him was a briefcase filled with his own personal Walther PPK pistols, which is what Vibbs was referring to before. For Blokhin, a true artist at his trade would use no one else's tools but his own. I'm going to debunk that in a second, but just know that he didn't use government-issued guns. He used smaller Walther pistols, the ones that I think Bond uses.
Yeah, I was going to say
Walther,
007, the GoldenEye video game.
Yeah.
Right.
The
I thought it was
PPKs
a
in there.
fake gun. for
No,
some
Walter's
reason.
a real gun.
No, I knew the Walter. I thought the PPK was always.
Oh,
Oh,
no,
okay.
GoldenEye doesn't lie. It's all realistic.
Yeah.
incredibly real.
So this is the deal. You would be brought down one by one to this 7,000 of them would be brought down one by one to this cellar door. Open up the door. There's a sloped floor and a guy there in a fucking leather thing. After the prisoner's identity was verified, he was brought handcuffed into the cellar room where Bloken awaited in his long apron like some horrible butcher. One guard later testified. The men, the prisoners, arms, and Bloken, they would hold the prisoner's arms. Bloken would go to the back of the prisoner, shoot him in the base of the skull, and that was it. That's the whole thing. There was no hooks involved. There was nothing else. He was simply just fucking efficient. Bloken worked fast and efficiently, killing an average of one man every 3 minutes during the course of 10-hour shifts. 3 men every 3 minutes for 10-hour shifts. The killings were always done at night so that the bodies could be disposed of in the darkness. That's a picture of Vasily Bloken. Fuck this guy. Bloken and his team worked without pause for 10 hours each night, and his tally of 7,000 shot in 28 days remains the most organized and protracted mass murder by a single individual on record and caused him being named the Guinness World Record holder for most prolific executioner in 2010. Boom.
I think there's a couple of other things he could be called that are more descriptive than that.
That eyewitness account that I just read about him bringing the briefcase, and, you know, obviously Vibbs had seen something on this guy ages ago, and he recalls the gun thing too, was a little bit blown out of proportion, right? It said that he didn't trust the reliability of the Soviet-issue TT-30 for its frequent heavy use as he intended, but also the use of this pocket pistol, this Walther, was commonly carried not by soldiers like Bloken, but by German police and intelligence agents, so it provided plausible deniability of the executions if the bodies were discovered later. So on top of being history's most prolific killer, he was also a huge fucking shady coward.
I guess
You know
that
what I'm saying?
eliminates the...
Did not work.
No,
All
it
of
did not.
Didn't
Yeah,
work,
it did
right.
not work.
But
Yeah,
it also eliminates the serial killer thing, right? Because they want credit.
yeah. I mean,
He was just...
I guess he
just
yeah.
evil.
He was very good at his job, unfortunately. But that's it.
God.
All right, so
Imagine him thinking that they'll go, we need some plausible deniability.
yeah,
Buddy,
exactly. Yeah,
Right? Yeah.
yeah.
We're going to link this back to you.
I don't know how long we're running, but we're coming to a close. And so look up Vasily Bloken when you get a sec. Look up a bunch of the stuff that we talked about today. Learn more about it. I am going to do something on the Great Purge at some point, but I'm going to close with a palate cleanser and with a Today I Learned. I think I'm going to do that every time. You know what I mean? If you guys get any of those, just let me know.
Send
what
us
you're
out on
doing.
a high note.
Yeah. Today I learned with the election just around the corner, the most rigged election of all time. You ever heard about this?
Oh, I've heard of the 2016 election, brother.
I want to... By the way, I want to do a twisted history of this country.
Liberia.
We've spoken about this.
Okay,
I've
so
told you this,
Liberia
you know
is a
this.
small
This
country
is
on the west
wild.
coast of Africa. Do you know what Liberia is?
Yeah.
Yeah, Liberia was able to do whatever the fuck they wanted because they had a bunch of rubber plants. And I think Firestone was paying them $1 million in order to make rubber for their tires. Right? Didn't we talk about how
I was going to say,
we tried to make that rubber thing in South America happen where they built that utopia in and around it and wound up failing miserably? So Firestone was buying all of its rubber from Liberia. It has nothing really to do with this story, but I just wanted to mention it because I don't know much.
I don't know if this is
Right, yeah.
Is
Go ahead.
Liberia where whenever during the Civil War they're like, oh, we can ship slaves to Liberia and let them live in like a colony in Liberia.
Maybe.
Is
Yes.
that
Yeah, so
Okay,
if you're
yeah.
looking at Africa like this, Liberia is like right here.
I'm going to send you everything I have on it. You're going to
Wow.
be like...
because
Right?
they were like
It's fascinating.
they're like
People
yeah
on
they should be
Rumble.
free, but
That's
they
Africa.
don't want them living with us.
You can
so
see
we'll
that.
send them, yeah.
Wait till I send you.
It's a Western
It's going to be... It'll be a wild episode.
But anyway, so the most rigged election in the history of the world was the 1927 Liberian general election. Small country, like I said. Their turnout for the 1927 election was 1,680% of the people. So 100% turnout is what you want for any election. You want 100% of your registered voters to show up and pull a lever. That one, 1,600% had showed up to pull a lever, which is impossible, right? So the candidate who won, his name is Charles D.B. King. He won with 230,000 votes. His opponent got only 9,000 votes. The reason that's outlandish is because Liberia has only 15,000 registered voters. 15,000 registered voters, and this guy got 230,000 votes. So whatever. And that's why it's listed in the Guinness Book of Records as the most fraudulent election in history. That's 2 Guinness Book references in a row, which I'm pretty proud of.
Great book.
Should be.
Right. So when we're talking about how dirty elections are in and around the United States, perhaps you're one of those guys like Vibsy.
I guess it would have been the 2020. I said 2016.
Yeah. So
They
just
both
think
were
about
rigged, brother.
Yeah, think about 1927 in Liberia. And then here's
I don't think there's an election that isn't.
Do we
True.
need to talk about anything else before we go? Is there anything? So I mentioned pencils with erasers. If you
Yes.
guys want to check that out, Annie's doing it with this gentleman Dan, and they're doing it every week, and it's pretty good. The one with me is especially good, obviously.
So our first one is the best one.
John is heading out to Gay Paris to go shit in the Seine at some point.
I love
Vibsy,
Paris.
what's
You're gonna
going
have
on?
a great time.
Talk
Is
to
this your
me.
first time?
Second time. I mean, it'll
Anything?
be different for the Olympics.
I've enlisted in the U.S. Marines, so that be on the lookout for that.
Congrats.
I'm getting shipped out.
Oh yeah.
That
Where you
would be
going,
fun.
Liberia?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Vibsy and I are looking for a possible replacement too. For our,
Oh, yeah.
for I have to check with Jake, but I was about to retire from the dozen, and Jake Marsh, selfish prick that he is, came in and retired before me to go and try and chase his dream as a sports broadcaster. So me and Vibs don't know where we stand next season for the dozen. So we have the opportunity to
What
either
about
walk away.
Yeah, me and Annie accept.
Yeah, right?
No,
I mean,
no,
we
no.
make a
This is
great
the whole.
team.
This is the whole deal.
And it's not like you've ever called me for a lifeline.
This is the
No,
whole.
we-
This is the whole deal.
Tell 'em our
Annie
weakness.
would be useless for what we need
Right.
because we need somebody that is
Sports.
primarily sports.
Yeah, I don't know anything
And
sports.
we actually need to keep Vibs and to find me, who also knows something about sports. I am
Yeah.
an absolute fucking liar. I actually turn off my mic when there's a sports question.
There's actually some questions.
I'm a
though.
liability.
Sometimes
I-
you
I'm
give them, and
100%.
I'm like, oh my God, you're gonna like I'm yelling at my phone as I'm watching you on the dozen, and like I'll ask him, did you win today? Did you lose today? And I forget the answers because
Are you winning,
but-
son?
Yeah, but and then I'll watch it and I'll be like, how did you get that wrong? That was clearly taking a Pelham 1, 2, 3.
I'll
Oh
tell you
yeah,
what,
yeah.
I was mad
there.
about
They all
that.
blend together. There was what's his name?
John Travolta
John
was-
Travolta. He had like 5 movies that were the same movie in the 2000s.
But so did Denzel. He was in both of those, like back to back, and I'm yelling at the because it was live. It was a
Oh,
live
right.
one. I was doing the dishes as I'm watching. I'm yelling at. I'm like, I can't
Yeah.
believe he got that wrong.
Yeah, so we did the championship recently in Chicago. Shot it live, so I was behind the camera for that, and I tried to answer. It's different when it's live under
Oh,
pressure.
really?
Yes.
Yeah.
The crowd is crazy. It's like an actual sporting event. So I was trying to answer in my head, and it's tough.
When the
So-
bright lights are on,
It's
it's tough.
It
You
adds a
did-
whole
yeah.
different element
Really?
to
We
it.
usually
Yeah.
do okay in that. Like that's the whole idea
Well,
of why I
sports,
was
I would-
disappointed.
I'd
But
leave you for
we
dead.
ran into a buzzsaw of handsome morons in the Blues Ponies, which Will Compton, I say this to their faces, fights, and Dana Beers. Like Dana
I
Beers
love Dana.
has content
I love all three
with
of them, but Dana makes me laugh.
Francis that is based on Dana not knowing simple stuff that he should have gotten like in 5th grade. But Will Compton, pokes fun at himself. He had to play KB in a match 1-on-1 where Will Compton got to use Google. That's the only way they could fucking even. So I'm not being mean when I say that. And they fucking smoked us.
Yeah. Well, he knows, like,
But if you-
who's the 2016 ACC Player of the Year?
Right.
Yeah, the
I mean-
sports ones, I would never
you-
be able
Well,
to help you.
there was one question where Will Compton's
The
like,
bag of
oh wait,
chips.
I had to scheme for this guy. I had to block this dude.
Mike
Right?
Pita.
Something like
the
that.
calorie
Ravens
one,
tight end.
the bag of chips that,
That was
he got
rough.
like the number right on, and he's literally you could see him figuring it out.
He
in his
held
head.
up math with how he got to the number, and I looked at the math and I did a quick Rain Man on it, and all the math was wrong, and yet they still came up with the exact calorie of a fucking
Did
family
anybody
size
check
bag
their
of
ears
Doritos.
for like the Secret
No,
Service?
yeah.
Like,
When we
just
went out,
saying.
Those
right,
guys are really
a little
great
bit-
guys,
yeah.
though.
They are.
Well,
Yeah.
if you've seen Dana recite every single NBA player and where they played in college, like that's crazy.
Crazy.
He knows
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
special. But after the dozen trivia tournament, we were out and some kid came up to me and was like, "Wow, you guys really choked." And I said, "No, you
Yeah.
can't say we choked. Like we
can't.
played a good
No,
game.
you
we
played
just
a
went up
game.
against a team that wasn't missing. They were hitting 80% of the
yeah,
shots."
I
They
agree.
they hit everything, and the dozen.
And I'd be brutally
They
honest.
continue-
I would tell you, you guys sucked
normally,
if you did.
normally I'm like, "Oh yeah, it's just trivia. Who cares?" But I was like, "No, buddy, we
Yeah.
did not choke."
They
Right.
continued to. They had quite the round, and they lost a heartbreaker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
and you know how you could tell? He was throwing shit. Like he's throwing stuff. Like he's
Yeah, you knocking
garbage.
over the bottles was very funny.
Yeah, thank you.
He is,
I was
you know
frustrated.
he's angry when he has a temper tantrum. Like
Yeah.
that.
I thought you were going to say that you kicked his ass. Just punch him right in
I
the
did.
mouth.
Oh, I did. I did kick his ass.
But congratulations to the Booze Ponies for beating us. And again, like fights, you know how much I love fights. Will, I think Will's wonderful. I might actually see him in Nashville this weekend. And Dana's a great guy.
He is.
But
We had fun in
I
Talladega.
we were playing up the idea of them not being smart, but being the smartest people in the world.
But that's
a dozen.
they're perfect for that brand of trivia.
The
Snacks,
worst-
pop culture, sports.
Yeah, the worst player in dozen history, I believe, is Francis, and Francis is arguably one of the more intelligent people that I've ever met.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's not
Another one who
Jeopardy.
throws a temper tantrum when they don't get the answer.
Oh yeah, that spoiled fucking brat.
Now,
Yeah.
if you're talking Baroque painting
That was the
painters,
Renaissance.
large and
Let's
I. That's
go.
Our, yeah.
Do you want to ask
Baroque
me
era.
about Rubenesque women?
How to,
Yeah.
how to
I'm going to
pronounce
tell you.
French words.
I'm going to.
Le
Yeah,
Relais de
exactly.
Chalet.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
Yeah, no. we-
Sonderkommando. Palate cleanser. So Mother's Day had just came and went. I don't know if I told you this story, Vibs. I don't know if I told you, John. Annie obviously had heard it.
You're-
I
know
what?
you're
I
gonna
think this
say.
is good.
It's a great story.
Yeah, I
I just
think
wasn't
it's good
expecting it.
because-
I don't do well with emotional things.
We just happened to talk about 9/11 today, and I think you guys know that as a podcast, we have a certain connection to it, right? And we say right from the onset, Annie's story, my story, is no worse than anyone else's story out there. It's just people gravitate towards it because they happen to know us, either directly or through the content that we create, and so it resonates with them. And I love that fact. That's why I put out this stupid blog every year. Not the stupid blog; it was the toughest thing I ever wrote. And that's why we talk about it all the time. I think it's kind of cathartic. You know, the BetterHelp people would tell us to do that. So it's Mother's Day this year. It's not a special Mother's Day at all. It's not like, an anniversary or anything like that, even though we just did our 25th anniversary.
Congratulations.
Thanks. I appreciate
Thank
that.
you.
25. Copper.
I think it's Nick. Yes. I don't know what it is.
The
It's
wood?
terrible. We should know, but we
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah. So the kids all like to get Annie gifts themselves. They like to get me my gifts. And then we wound up paying for these things, obviously. But, if the kids are like, oh, I think Dad would like this, and Annie gets it, and it seems like, as opposed to her just giving me a bunch of gifts and putting the kids' names on it. So I go through the same thing with her. What do you think for Mom? Bridget has a bunch of ideas. She's a 14-year-old girl. And the boys have some other stupid ideas. But we get them and we give them to her. So this year I had an idea, and all the kids gave Annie their gifts first. And it was perfect. You know what I mean? Like everything
awesome.
seemed like it made sense. Then I gave her my gift, and it was a single gift. And so for people who don't remember the story of 9/11, 2 planes hit a... So... all the people that Annie had grown up with and her dad and her uncle were killed because they were doing their Tuesday morning breakfast at Windows of the World, which is a restaurant at the top of World Trade Center Tower 2, right? Tower 1, I'm sorry.
With the needle.
And so I used to go a bunch when I worked with Rick and the guys, and Annie used to go every week because she was still working for her dad and with all the dudes. So this year, in 2001, Annie didn't go on Tuesday because she had a root canal on Monday. So her tooth was fucked up. So instead, she actually drove me to work that morning, dropped me off at Citigroup, which was a little bit north of the Twin Towers, and then she parked her car.
That was Monday. I didn't go. I took the train in on Tuesday.
Tuesday, that's right. I drove in on
You
Monday.
wouldn't let me go.
I
You're
drove
like, oh,
in.
you got out of it.
Yeah.
Because I canceled. I can't.
So
I
the
called my
reason-
dad on Monday. And
yeah.
I was like, I'm not going to breakfast tomorrow.
Everybody who went to that breakfast is dead. Okay, there's no exceptions, except for the one person who didn't go to that breakfast, and that's Annie. And the reason she wasn't there was because of this fucking tooth. Okay, so that's the story, right? Simple to say.
Yep.
So you fast forward
it.
25 years, and she's at an oral surgeon, Dr.
Cho.
Cho.
I love him.
And he's removing a tooth.
November he took it out, and you posted a lovely picture of me the day that he took my tooth out.
Yeah. It
in
was
the car.
actually January because we just switched
January.
insurance.
Well, that
Annie's
was
in the
different.
chair.
That was this one.
Yeah. Annie's
My
in the
mouth is a
chair,
nightmare.
and her mouth's a fucking mess. So anyway, this guy takes out the tooth, and when he does, he fucking obliterates it, right? Because they took the tooth out, they put in a post, and then they screwed in, so she got a fake tooth somewhere back there. And so I'd asked him for it, right? And so when he gave it to me in a bag. He gave it to me like sight unseen too. It was pretty cool of him to do, Dr. Cho. I should
had
fucking
no
remember his
idea
name.
that
So
he was
Vibsy,
doing
I'm
this.
telling you, for weeks I had this thing stashed away in the basement, and I would go down there every now and again to work on it with like tweezers and super glue. And
Shows you how aware I am of what's going on in my
yeah,
house. I have
and so I
Put it back together.
I put the tooth back together, right?
Oh my God.
And like, look at all the
So
work that it
embarrassing.
had on it. I put it in one of these fucking shadow boxes.
Yeah.
So that's all that she opened up for me for Mother's Day, and the kids were like, you know, what is that?
Kind of macabre a little bit.
So when I told the kids
Very
the
much so.
story,
Like, I
I
was-
said, this tooth here, and we're a history podcast, this tooth here is the only reason that my kids are alive. We would not have adopted Mick because I wouldn't be married. So I would not have adopted my oldest, and we wouldn't have had the other two, biologically and stuff. So nobody would be here because none of the kids would be here because of this tooth. Annie wouldn't be here because of this tooth. And God knows what I would be, because of this tooth. So it's like I've been married for 25 years to the same woman, as far as you guys know. I've spent literally hundreds of thousands of dollars on gifts for my wife. 25 years, especially when I was spending money like the world was going to an end, hundreds of thousands of dollars. I spent $6 on this fucking frame, and I spent $4 on a thing of Gorilla Glue. And by far, that's the best gift I think I've ever given you. You agree, right? Yeah. So anyway, I think that's a good little palate cleanser to go away with. So the only reason that the Saint is able to co-host this, it's not the cleanest tooth in the world, by the way, now that I'm looking at it, is because of this
I hope
goddamn
it didn't look
tooth.
like that when it was in there.
Yeah. But and that's like 6 or 7 pieces. I actually threw away a couple of pieces too. I dumped them illegally somewhere. But that's it. So that's the end of the Twisted
circle.
History of Dumping with myself, St. Ann, Vibs, and John. We'll see you guys next month on Twisted History.